Chapter 485. Don't retreat. God repeated this command. Then he explained to Luo Nan and Cat Eyes, who were focused on intercepting the rat tide, "We have no way to safely ascend at this distance." Cat Eyes teased, "Actually, we should be moving forward, right? It looks like old Gao has quite the offensive ability." God didn't respond. He just reported the current situation. Their group was 50 meters away from helipad number 76. Adding the distance to the aircraft, they were over 70 meters away. This distance, plus the time it would take to ascend, would take 40 seconds. At the same time, He Yuan and the biker gang were 40 meters away from them. Judging from the previous battle, the biker gang would need 40 to 50 seconds to cross this area under He Yuan's interception. And if the biker gang were to truly push into the vast area of the helipad, they would lose the restrictions of the cargo corridor. Controlling the direction and speed of their assault would undoubtedly be an even more arduous task. In the end, this wasn't a race. In actual combat, an advantage of a few seconds was equivalent to no advantage at all. While Luo Nan and Cat Eyes were cleaning up the rat tide, the data link between the deep blue walkers had already calculated many times. They came to a consensus: if they retreated any further, the final result would most likely be a life-and-death battle on the spacious helipad with the wreckage of the aircraft. Instead of this, it would be better to resolve the problem in the relatively favorable environment of the cargo corridor. Luo Nan's group stopped and turned to face the cargo corridor behind them. They were only 30 meters away from the exit of the corridor. Gao Meng smacked his lips in the Shungbing building several dozen kilometers away. His conclusion was roughly the same as the other side: we must counterattack. We must counterattack in this cargo corridor. Ouyang, if you really want to make a move, then do it here. Ouyang Chen looked at the problem from a slightly different angle. The opponent has been pressing the line all this time. He has quite a bit of strength to spare. He has grasped the rhythm very well. He must have calculated this step from the beginning of the pursuit. So what? Gao Meng disapproved. We predicted this earlier. The one behind him isn't extraordinary to be able to reach this step by relying on the clone body. His consciousness is there. It would be strange if he couldn't do it. The problem right now is to first bring him back before anything else. It's better to make a move earlier than later. You're the one who said it. Don't tell me you want to test the youngsters again. Ouyang Chen adjusted his glasses and replied with a smile: I can't stop young people from having their own ideas. Look, his efficiency hasn't decreased at all. Indeed, Luo Nan hadn't considered the factors on Ouyang Chen's side. He was in high spirits right now in sweeping the rat tide, especially considering a deeper problem. He replied without thinking: completely wipe out the rat tide and destroy the pressure transfer network. That fellow won't be able to last much longer than the last one. God still believed that the psychic wave network had actively interfered in the latter half of the rat tide. Rather than asking President Ouyang to eliminate the rat tide, it would be better to directly kill the target. Mr. Luo can submit a request. The train of thought on both sides was on completely different channels, but Luo Nan still listened to the opinions of professionals. He followed the procedures he learned earlier and sent out an application through Channel X. Luo Nan didn't care that the other side didn't respond immediately after he sent out the corresponding message. Cat Eyes had completely stopped what she was doing. Currently, there were no living rats within a radius of 100 meters. She knew about Luo Nan's battle results from the few rounds of sweeping. However, she had no intention of correcting God's mistaken perception. She just said to Luo Nan, the difficulty has increased. Since the biker gang had already discovered the abnormal decrease in the rat tide, they had already shifted the distribution area of the rat tide to the side and the rear 200 meters away. The distance between them and Luo Nan and the others had already increased to nearly 300 meters. This sort of distribution situation had already exceeded the range of Cat Eye's all-encompassing senses. It was already hard for her to grasp the situation completely. She only knew that Luo Nan was still killing. But even if the distance factor wasn't taken into account, it was hard to avoid intense interference from the central battlefield if one wanted to use the mental to interfere with the material plane to continue killing the target. Luo Nan grunted. there's a bit of a problem. The pace of battle in the cargo corridor was extremely fast. In the time it took for Luo Nan and the others to stop speaking, the distance between He Yueyin and the biker gang had shrunk to within 30 meters. They really couldn't retreat at this time. God and Si Guoxing had already gathered their full attention. As professional security personnel, they didn't know what President Ouyang was planning. But their professionalism still drove them to make the steadiest choice. They still maintained their front and rear positions. God crossed his arms, erecting a high-strength alloy shield to serve as a defensive checkpoint. Si Guoxing carried the portable electromagnetic cannon on his shoulder. He stabilized the cannon's muzzle and aimed it at the flitting and leaping figures. The format of fire of the two surged and linked with each other. Their energies interconnected, realizing the effect of 1 + 1 greater than 2. Luo Nan had always been relatively sensitive to the format of fire. His telepathic thoughts cut across, and he knew that the format of fire of the two had actually left an opening for He Yueyin. With He Yueyin's abilities, even if she couldn't reach the standard of Tian Bang setting up the format domain by himself that day, it would be hard to say if she had the support of these two elite burners. If this was the case, then there was still a fight to be had. Luo Nan's gaze turned and cast toward the battlefield within the passageway. But the focus of his gaze did not fall upon the battlefield. It didn't even fall upon any part of the material plane. It was just cast into nothingness. Right now, he still retained his examination and contemplation of the repetitive work and repetitive problems of the dripping sword. The problem of how to use the dripping sword to sweep through the rat tide in a more efficient and more technical manner occupied the majority of his brain's resources. This was a simplification of the problem in a certain sense. In any case, Luo Nan had professional security personnel and President Ouyang supporting him from behind the scenes. Luo Nan wasn't worried about his life. Instead, he entered a long-term testing state at the edge of the battlefield. Luo Nan was already quite adept at the normal application of the dripping sword. He could casually dismantle and apply the entire structural skeleton. He could even rely on his feelings to draw on his own power. Such a situation was faintly similar to the training and fighting methods of the martial arts lineage that Gym Master Xiao had taught him. The routines that Luo Nan normally practiced and the variations in moves that he researched were all for the sake of making the most correct and effective response in actual combat. He normally trained with the dripping sword. He would choose the best of the several hundred dripping swords every day. He would compare them to the parts that were left to the end. He would ponder deeply, refer to, and make corrections. He would constantly temper and optimize the core structural skeleton, making it more and more reasonable and efficient. Now that he was in an actual combat state, there was no need to delve into the details. He just needed to take out the established results and seek killing efficiency. When this efficiency was raised to the extreme, all of the techniques would be integrated into one. They were like the marks of a pen. It was enough to see just a bit of ink. The problem was that Luo Nan wasn't satisfied. If he was only dealing with one or a few enemies, his methods could be said to be like moving clouds and flowing water, lifting something heavy as if it were light. However, when the enemies expanded to hundreds and thousands, no matter how concise and quick the movements were, they would appear monotonous and clumsy after being repeated countless times. No matter how smooth a single line is, the overall effect is trash when it's mechanically piled up. Luo Nan took out the standard for sketching. He took the entire process from the moment he made his move into his field of vision and evaluated it. From this perspective, the current battlefield environment of the rat tide and the confrontation between the strong was a special canvas. The skeleton structure of the dripping sword, which Luo Nan had tempered over and over again, was the brush. Painting on a canvas with a paintbrush was a special process of interference between the mental and the material. After this idea became clear, Luo Nan suddenly discovered that it was of the same origin as his train of thought when he constructed the living starry sky. They were both results of redefining and observing the world from a holistic perspective. They were solidified in a way that conformed to his habits of thinking. This was the process of Luo Nan's self-cognition. As his train of thought grew clearer and more intuitive, the corresponding feeling grew more and more intense. As a painter, it was obviously possible to casually draw on the canvas. However, the lack of beauty, the abandonment of rules and logic gave Luo Nan a rather terrible experience. Was there no efficient, orderly, rigorous, and even a bit of beauty in the overall form of interference? Oh, there was. Wasn't President Ouyang's logic world just like this? Why did his train of thought seem to have returned to the concept of an order frame? If this was the case, then his train of thought just now was simply a form of creating a brand new order frame. Of course, this kind of creation depended on time and local conditions. It was a kind of temporary method with many restrictions. Luo Nan circled around a few times, and all sorts of thoughts that he had accumulated over this period of time began to surge. He faintly felt that he already had a few similar results. However, he had grown far too quickly in these past 2 months, and his gains were far too great. Some of his gains were inadvertently drowned out. When it came down to it, he needed to carefully sort them out. Luo Nan was a bit distressed. What is it again? Cat Eyes didn't understand. Huh. There's something in my brain. It's... His words suddenly came to a halt halfway through. It wasn't that his train of thought had been cut off. It was that the outside world suddenly stimulated him like a sudden clap of thunder and lightning. A long ripping sound rang out at this moment, followed by the sound of an explosion. Yuan's deep blue walker armor heavily smashed through the side wall, sending rubble flying everywhere. However, she immediately spun around, forcefully changing her direction to block the front of Luo Nan and the others. She relied on this displacement to coil and soar the format of fire around her body. It connected with the flickering flames of Gao De and Si Guosheng. A blazing radiance burst forth in an instant, illuminating the originally bewildering passageway with snow-white light. Format domain. In front of her, the motorcycle biker's body seemed to have ignited with fire. The surrounding warped air was wantonly transmitting high temperatures, dyeing the nearby partitions and walls with a layer of charcoal-like black. This ability user, Clone Lung, had eyes that seemed hollow yet deep. He locked onto Yuan, who had set up her format domain. His body slightly arched, looking as if he was about to unleash an explosive attack. But this fellow's movements paused in the next second. He turned his head in a very strange manner, seeming to have been disturbed by some sudden event behind him. It was also at this moment that Luo Nan saw the strange split of the other's mouth. Syllables flowed from his throat for the first time at the same time. It looks like I need to add something first. While most people were baffled, Yuan issued an order within the mission channel. Chapter 486. Si Guosheng was the only one in the team with an electromagnetic gun. He fired it reflexively. Amidst the sound of electric currents, a 15-gram metal pellet exploded out of the muzzle at 20 times the speed of sound. It tore through the sound barrier. The air burned within the narrow passageway, and hot winds assaulted their faces. Si Guosheng was already paying more attention to his nearby companions, but Luo Nan and Cat Eyes still had their ears rumble. They instinctively crouched down. The raging flames and heat waves surged above their heads. This kind of bombardment was not something the fleshly body could resist. However, the biker gang member displayed his super keen senses. Even though Yuan had specially used the mission channel of the psychic wave network to secretly issue orders, this fellow still shifted his position ahead of time before the artillery shell left the chamber. He narrowly avoided the trajectory of the bullet. The deafening sound of an explosion rang out at nearly the same time. Under the effect of the powerful kinetic energy, the passageway behind them collapsed in an instant. Even the structure of the upper and lower floors caved in. The entire building groaned and trembled. Yuan's figure turned from stillness at this moment. An arc of light flashed, and she pounced forward. Admittedly, the biker gang member had avoided the disaster of death by shifting his position ahead of time, but this limited his direction. In addition to the obstruction of the collapsing ruins behind him, he had practically no leeway to choose. And what he had to face right now, aside from Yuan's assault of an arc of light that transcended the sound barrier, there was also the rapidly expanding formatting domain. Intense light and heat waves intersected in the void. Visually, the space seemed to warp and deform. The light enveloped the surroundings in the next second, sweeping away practically every shadowy corner. It made one suspect that even their internal organs had been penetrated, turning transparent. Light and heat were always linked together, but at this moment, the heat within the passageway was greatly reduced under the all-encompassing intense light. The high temperature of the furnace, controlled by the biker gang member, was cleansed and dissipated. His body also warped and shrunk within the light. In the end, he was streaked by the swift and fierce arc of light. He smashed through the wall amidst a spray of blood and quickly fled far away. Hiyuain had already strode forward in pursuit, but after taking 2 steps, her speed suddenly decreased. The mission channel displayed the latest news. Machine number 1's overclocking state has ended. Officer. God could not help but shout. Hiyuain took another step forward, but she still stopped. And at this time, the aura of the biker gang member, which was boiling like a furnace, rapidly cooled down and calmed down. After charging out 200 meters, he simply concealed himself without a trace. This was not just on the spiritual plane. Even when he interfered with the physical plane, there was no feedback at all. It was as if the spiritual plane had disappeared into thin air. Luo Nan was speechless when faced with this kind of opponent who hid when he said he would. Formatting the domain. Cat Eye's attention was drawn to Hiyuain. Her first impression of Hiyuain wasn't good, but after a period of observation and familiarization, as well as the shifting of hatred and other factors, her evaluation of Hiyuain became more and more fair. This wave of maneuvering is really immediate. It feels like she's not much worse than that Tian Bang. That slash was also very cool. Hiyuain took a few seconds to regulate her breathing, but she was still panting a little. It was obvious that she had consumed a lot of energy just now. The enemy retreated on their own. It's probably because they cut through the supply line that they lost the ability to continue fighting. Supplies? What was going on? Is the rat tide almost cleaned up? Currently, the distance between the group and the main body of the rat tide had already exceeded the range of Cat Eye's all-encompassing senses. In comparison, the integrated sensing module of the Deep Blue Walkers was more useful. Combined with the shared images from the psychic wave network, she was able to roughly project the current state of the rat tide in the ruins behind them. It could be seen that the thermal imaging results were sporadic in the surroundings of the freight corridor, where the temperature had already dropped. The data statistics were much more convenient. God reported, there are 1437 left, 1311 left. The rate of decline is fast. According to this rate of reduction, the rat tide would be swept clean in another 10 seconds or so. Even if it was raining knives, it would be impossible to kill them off so quickly, right? Cat Eyes looked at Luo Nan in astonishment. Even she was doubting whether or not the Shangding building had joined in the interference. Luo Nan actually frowned. In the instant Hiyuain and the motorcycle gang collided, the enemy had exploded at least 500 rats in order to support the corresponding explosion. This caused the rat tide to shrink by over a quarter in an instant. But what was truly strange was that there were no decent reinforcements after that. This was the most important reason why the scale of the rat tide had shrunk. The source seemed to have been cut off. Luo Nan expanded his sensing range to cover the entire area. At this time, Hiyuain explained softly, we just sent a group of people to destroy the enemy's nest within the building. It can be considered as taking drastic measures. Cat Eyes was enlightened. A nest. That's right. Of course there's one. But do you know where it is? Since it's a nest, energy and nutrition are indispensable. In the wilderness, these nests are often placed within high-energy mineral deposits that can be absorbed and transformed. The basic conditions won't change in the city. It must be within an area suitable for replenishment. Cat Eyes snapped her fingers. The energy center. Due to the leaps and bounds in energy technology, the current mega-metropolis of Xia City had basically achieved a decentralized distribution of energy supply. For example, the gear laboratory that Luo Nan was more familiar with was equipped with an independent power station. Large buildings like the Kawan Communications Building located in the center of the bustling city were also equipped with an independent energy center. If one didn't care about the technical links such as mass to energy conversion, then the most convenient energy supply point would naturally be there. The relevant images were already connected to the mission channel as they spoke. The energy center should be a team of ability users mobilized by Hiyuain. There seemed to be a military police background as well. Right now, the operation to clear out the nest had already ended. They were currently cleaning up the mess. Hiyuain explained a step further. Right now, the SCA has already taken samples of the abnormal changes in the building's energy center. The relevant areas within the city are under full surveillance. If this sort of situation is encountered again, an emergency power cut will be needed. Cat Eyes gave her evaluation. Crushed by resources. Hiyuain had fully utilized their advantage in resources in Xia City. Soldiers came with generals, water came with earthwear. Even if they fell into a disadvantage for a time, they could immediately carry out targeted improvements to make up for the loopholes. As the enemy's strength was gradually exposed, the enemy's space for activity would constantly shrink. The advantage of their side would grow greater and greater. This was truly the most upright way of using troops. This sort of method wasn't anything out of the ordinary. What was truly rare was that Hiyuain was in the middle of an intense battle. She was able to think and issue orders in a timely manner. Otherwise, even if they had more resources, it would be meaningless if they couldn't mobilize them properly. At this time, Cat Eyes could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Without the rat tied to die for him, that fellow would probably only be at the standard of 4 or 5 explosive strikes. Speaking of which, he's also injured. I didn't get a clear look just now. Are his injuries serious enough? His chest was cut open. His internal organs are damaged. Hiyuain's breathing had completely returned to normal at this time. Her breathing was practically non-existent. She wore an exoskeleton armor and her face was covered by a helmet. She looked like an ice-cold robot. In reality, her thoughts were as calm as a machine's. The enemy's retreat isn't necessarily a good thing. From the design of the ability user clone body, it can be seen that they weren't built for a protracted battle from the very beginning. Moreover, they were able to perfectly conceal themselves even after being injured. This only proves that their injuries didn't truly affect their strength. God expressed his approval. That's right. Clone bombs and ability user assassins are the true job of these fellows. Cat Eyes rubbed her chin. After all, they aren't true life forms. If they were to throw caution to the wind and self-destruct, I don't know what the scene would be like. Oh, if that's the case, could it be that they relied on the rat tied to greatly exhaust your physical strength in preparation for the final strike? Are you still okay? Hiyuain didn't directly respond to Cat Eyes' inquiry. She only added, they were also measuring my limits. It would be more advantageous for me to make a final judgment. At the same time, they might be luring me to get used to the intensity from before, causing me to make an error in judgment at the last moment. Wait for the thunderous strike. Cat Eyes' gaze swept over her companions and the surrounding ruined environment. Even if you think with your toes, you'll know that the moment when the flying device takes off is the most perfect. With that fellow's ability and destructive power, it's simply an unbreakable knot. Why didn't they wait until then to reveal their trump card? Si Guosheng spoke in a deep voice. This was the first time he had taken the initiative to participate in a discussion since joining the team. His thoughts were extremely clear. The target clearly possesses extremely powerful concealment techniques. The building surveillance and sensor systems haven't discovered any traces of him up until now. It's because the rat tide is hard to conceal. A certain someone is extremely sensitive. Cat Eyes' gaze turned and pointed straight at Luonan. Luonan didn't react at all. Cat Eyes had long since grown accustomed to his wandering soul. She just shrugged. In the end, a counterattack is the most correct choice. In the inner world, strength ultimately speaks for itself. The problem is, where is he? We haven't discovered any traces yet, but the rat tide is about to arrive. Oh, they've all been killed. Don't just look at the group of people conversing at the end of the passageway. Most of their attention was focused on observing the surveillance. They were trying to search for the hidden and dangerous target. But so far, they had found nothing. Everyone's gazes inevitably turned to Luo Nan. Little did they know that Luo Nan's heart was quite vexed right now. The scale of the rat tide rapidly cleared to 0, representing the complete collapse of the so-called pressure transfer network. But from his perspective, the nature of his paper rapidly changed. The feelings he had just accumulated also vanished like smoke into thin air. Even if he had some clues right now, he could forget about experimenting with them. Fortunately, he was able to notice the gazes of his companions. He withdrew his mind somewhat unwillingly and asked suspiciously, "What did you guys say?" Everyone was already immune to this sort of reaction. Yuan immediately repeated the relevant problem in a simple and clear manner. Her main focus was still on the whereabouts of the motorcycle gang. Luo Nan shook his head. That fellow certainly has some method to interfere with mental senses. I fell for it before. If I do it again, I don't dare to say that my senses will be correct. For example, right now. It's impossible for that fellow to just flee a kilometer or 2 away. But the truth is that I can't find any traces of him at all. He believed that the motorcycle gang should have a method of assimilating with the surrounding environment. This included the optical aspect and the deeper information aspect. In this case, he would inevitably be troubled by the corresponding camouflage colors unless he completely gathered and analyzed the information on the material plane within a radius of several kilometers. Luo Nan finished his analysis and looked at Yuan. But Yuan still had her metal visor facing him. Actually, it wasn't just Yuan. Gouda and Si Guosheng had the same posture. Their gazes pierced through the visor to stare at him. Luo Nan just felt baffled. He turned to look at Cat Eyes, who looked quite normal. What did I miss? Cat Eyes blinked. She made an exaggerated expression of astonishment in an instant. 1 kilometer. Why 1 kilometer? Vice President what was the range of his all-encompassing senses when someone reported last time? How would I know how much he said last time? Luo Nan saw this and immediately knew that he had inadvertently let the cat out of the bag. The speed at which his mental senses expanded and the frequency of changes had already drowned out his memory reserves. Luo Nan's mind went blank for a moment. He could only answer vaguely, "My senses toward living beings are more sensitive right now. My all-encompassing senses are a bit higher than normal." Cat Eyes laughed. "Your family's senses are 10 times or 20 times?" Luo Nan glared fiercely at her. "It doesn't matter if it's 10 times or 20 times. It doesn't matter if you can't find the enemy. Is there a need to keep harping on this? You'll be happy when I tell you the number of 20 kilometers later, right?" Huh. An inexplicable inspiration popped up in the depths of Luo Nan's mind in this instant. Luo Nan's current level of mental senses really wasn't his highest level. His highest level was still when his soul left his body, when he completely broke free from the shackles of his fleshly body. In the past, there was a huge disparity between the fusion of body and soul and the separation of body and soul. This was mainly due to the serious imbalance between his mind and his body. Right now, Luo Nan was following Gym Master Xiao in tempering his fleshly body. He also received the reverse nourishment of his soul strength. His toughness had increased by a large margin. In addition, he was influenced by the gear telescope format. The form of mental senses underwent a substantial transformation, and its efficiency grew day by day. The disparity between the two states grew smaller and smaller. But in reality, the disparity between the limits of his soul strength and his fleshly body was growing larger. The reason why it didn't lead to more serious consequences was because Luo Nan made full use of the miraculous effects of the neuron in the outside world. It was also because his attainments in the mutual interference between the mental and the material had increased by a large margin. In short, if he were to leave his body right now, he would indeed have the ability to raise the level of his mental senses to another level. At that time, Luo Nan's face drooped, and the light that flickered in his mind grew brighter and brighter. That's right. At that time, he would use a special method to realize the mutual interference between the mental and material planes. The soul cloak. Yes. Yes. He had just thought of the paintbrush and canvas, but he wasn't able to understand the method of interference clearly. It was the soul cloak. Luo Nan still remembered that he had just comprehended the mysteries of the condensation ring that day. He had used it as a medium to forcefully interfere with the material world, allowing him to bring the external neuron to gear and open the mysterious door leading to the cloud world. It was during this process that the soul cloak was molded and formed with the help of the condensation ring, allowing his soul strength to truly cross the boundary between the mental and material planes. He realized a breakthrough from 0 to 1, achieving an unprecedented interference effect. His sense of familiarity came from this. The cloak. Could the interference effect of the dripping sword be like this? No. It was the same method. The difference between having and not having a clear direction was enormous. And Luo Nan was used to the condensation ring, which had no killing power at all. If he were to add the support structures one by one, what sort of effect would there be? He really wanted to test it out right now. Luo Nan nearly left his body right away. Luckily, he still remembered what time it was right now. Once his soul left his body, his fleshly body would be tantamount to an empty shell. He might not be able to react in time if he encountered an unexpected event. He was still able to distinguish between priorities and urgency. But if this was the case, so what if he didn't leave his body? In any case, it was a method of mutual interference between the mental and the material. It didn't seem to matter if he left his body or not. At most, he could make the external neuron in his brain change its form. It would change from a fluid form that was as bright as a dragon to a fixed form like the condensation ring. Would there be any danger? Luo Nan didn't think too much about it. In fact, the external neuron in his brain had already coiled and twisted the moment his philosophy changed, forming a perfect condensation ring structure. Then, a cool and comfortable feeling spread out from his brain. It was as if a layer of mint had been smeared near his brain. It was cold, cool, and extremely comfortable. Was this the condensation ring letting water seep out? Ha! Luo Nan's body suddenly froze when this thought was confirmed. Then cold sweat flowed down. He had actually condensed the condensation ring in his brain, and he had even allowed it to freely absorb water molecules. This was a standard case of pouring water into his brain. It must be known that water made up 70% of a human's body weight. With the powerful might of the condensation ring, it only took a breath to separate and purify bodily fluids and condense them into a bead of water. If he had placed several support structures into the ring, his brain might have exploded by now. This was a high-end way of dying that not even the cloned rats had enjoyed. Presumably, it would be passed down in Xia City and even the entire inner world, becoming a joke for 100 years. Luo Nan's body was covered in cold sweat, and he wanted to immediately disperse the structure. However, the cool and comfortable feeling continued. The condensation ring formed by the external neuron did not form a substantial bead of water to fill his brain. Only the cool feeling continued to spread. It seeped from his brain to his face, to his neck, to his chest, back, waist, and finally to his legs and even the tips of his fingers. Even his hair was seeping with cool air. This cool feeling was like an endlessly expanding membrane that covered every corner of his body. It continued to expand outward, brushing past the surrounding void as if it were weightless. At this very moment, the 3 deep blue walkers, who were equipped with advanced sensing equipment, did not discover any abnormalities. Only Cat Eyes looked at him with some confusion, but she did not obtain any concrete results. What followed was a feeling that grew more and more familiar. It was exactly the same as the soul cloak that unfurled after his soul left his body. This marvelous cloak that hovered between the tangible and the intangible simultaneously unfurled toward the mental and material worlds. On the mental plane, it drifted in the polar domain. On the material plane, it affected the microscopic. From beginning to end, it maintained a certain distance from the world that ordinary people were used to, yet it could cut in at any time. Luo Nan's grasp on the mental plane was quite good. After all, this was a mysterious and undetermined region. What he saw was what he got. What he knew was everything. But on the microscopic plane, 1,000 years of physics development had already drawn the basic picture of the microscopic world. With the existing knowledge system, Luo Nan was certain that his sub-micron level sensing precision was far from being able to touch the true microscopic world. However, the marvelous effects of the condensation ring manifested here. He really could not see it, but he could clearly feel the marvelous disturbances within the area covered by his mental senses. The atmosphere, the building, and the human body were like the gentle flapping of a cloak. And when Luo Nan's thoughts took effect, the boundless power that came from the mental side instantly suppressed the relevant disturbances. The cloak expanded and rippled according to his thoughts. It was as if it ruled the entire microscopic plane. With Luo Nan's current knowledge structure, wanting to give this phenomenon an accurate and comprehensive explanation was tantamount to a lunatic's ravings. He did not count on this. He just needed to use his own clairvoyance to decipher it. This was an interference painting that used the condensation ring as the tip of the brush and the surrounding material plane as the canvas. The cloak was the result of the painting. But this result was a product of the unconscious. It could change at any time as Luo Nan's consciousness entered it. All he needed to know was what direction the change was. And so, he needed to have a clear train of thought. But new information formed within the natural disturbances of the cloak before Luo Nan could sort things out. It was transmitted back. The high-speed moving target caused the natural disturbances on the microscopic plane to deform. Large amounts of ingenious hedging operations were carried out, causing the traces to be mostly cancelled out before they could be transmitted to the normal perceptible plane. The traces were ingeniously buried within the multifarious and complex flow of information. The technique was marvelous, but these operations appeared excessively noisy if one were to use the microscopic background as a reference. They were too orderly and deliberate. The motorcycle gang. The concrete facts had just been restored to Luo Nan's mind when another stimulus followed. Compared to the exquisite and peerless concealment and control of the cloak, this wave was simply an explosive attack. Luo Nan did not need to decode too much to figure out the direction and the concrete changes. It was the explosive growth history of a cell. Under the effect of some inconceivable method, a single cell rapidly absorbed an enormous amount of energy on the submicron scale. It borrowed this energy to carry out a frenzied fission and proliferation. Then it completed the transformation from a single cell to a complete life form. Then it divided and proliferated, a complete set of processes. As for the appearance of the proliferated life form, Luo Nan had already encountered it countless times before. The gray and white rat shadows were like flowing turbid liquid. They sprinkled down one after another, converging into a river and surging out like a tide. Luo Nan was just about to issue an alarm when the information from the energy center entered the mission channel. The relevant monitoring personnel discovered this situation at practically the same time as Luo Nan through the changes in the power supply curve. The energy system controlled by the supercomputer reacted faster than humans by a thread. The energy supply was cut off the moment the problem appeared. However, the enemy only needed a split second to do so. It was a mechanism that had been planted in place long ago. Plus, those were probably not real rats. Luo Nan noticed that this wave of gray and white rat tide did not realize a complete conversion of mass and energy. The things that surged out from the energy center were more like phantoms of the rat tide than the rat tide. They existed between reality and illusion. Perhaps this was closer to the essence of the enemy's design. The rats were not just rats. They were special networks that were used to shift enormous pressure and increase the operating space. The network was just a network. The true killer move still lay in the concealed fellow who had yet to emerge. Luo Nan could not afford to delay no matter what. He could not afford to delve any deeper into his research. He followed closely the warning information raised by the energy center. Through the functions of the psychic wave network, he directly made changes to the intelligence map integrated into the mission channel. But the problem was that he was actually unable to make changes. According to the feedback from the psychic wave network system, there was an even higher level of authority to synchronize the operation, and the overlap rate reached 100%. Chapter 487. Due to the interference of a strong magnetic field, the transmission rate of the psychic wave network in the target area has dropped by 4 points. 3 fulcrum points have been temporarily disconnected. They are in the direction of the energy center. Guild leader, we expect the interference rate to drop below 20%. The SCA requests that the power center temporarily disconnect from the network. 4 of the rescue team's fulcrums have been disconnected. There are only 9 fulcrums left in the target area, which is close to the bottom line. The atmosphere in the maintenance team on the 13th floor of the Shangbing building instantly became tense. The maintenance team had always been monitoring the battle situation in the communication building, and had always maintained the ability to intervene at any time. However, when a new wave of rats emerged from the energy center, the monitoring remained the same, but the expected ability to intervene quickly dropped. This kind of negative trend made the staff members involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. The fulcrum of the psychic wave network was the ability user who used the Hexaear terminal. The existence of these people was the foundation of the psychic wave network. Currently, within the communications building of Division King, aside from Luo Nan's group of 5, there were 4 support personnel on the helipad. There was also a 3-man combat squad that was temporarily mobilized in the energy center. There was also a 4-man rescue squad that was heading to the passageway to rescue the injured. After the new wave of rats appeared, the combat team in the energy center and the medical team in the middle of the freight corridor were not attacked, but their Hexaear terminals were disconnected from the psychic wave network. This is anti-interference. I feel like I'm being targeted. Gao Meng's expression was solemn as he stared at the central projector without blinking. On the other hand, Ouyang Chen had just finished the last stroke on the shared intelligence map. It could be seen that the marks were distributed in a circular pattern, shrinking layer by layer, from the original 200 meters to the current 100 meters area. Gao Meng's expression turned even uglier when he saw the trajectory map. Luo Nan and Cat Eyes have covered this area with their all-encompassing senses, but they still haven't discovered anything. Ouyang, this is no longer a situation they can handle. Gao Meng, the other staff members, and even Luo Nan's group at Kuwang's communications building were able to grasp the whereabouts of the biker gang by relying on the trajectory Ouyang Chen had drawn. At that moment, the grayish-white rat horde relied on their almost illusory form to advance in a straight line. They approached from the energy center all the way to the periphery of the cargo corridor. Meanwhile, the biker assassins began to change their existing circular route and approached from the right and bottom of the flanks. The biker gang should also know that their whereabouts had been exposed, but so what? He Yueyin, God, and Si Guisheng turned to face the enemy and activated their long-range weapons. Among them, the most powerful one was the portable electromagnetic cannon. If fired at full power, even a B+ class expert would find it hard to defend against it head-on. But the problem was that the biker gang was positioned on the lower side of the building. The middle floor and walls were filled with obstacles, making it completely unsuitable for the electromagnetic cannon to unleash its power. As for the maintenance team, with Gao Meng's insight and the results of the psychic wave network's detection, he could roughly tell that the enemy's electric rat army explosion technique did not increase the number of rats, but rather the upper limit of the biker assassin. The rat tide, which was in between reality and illusion, was like a gigantic solar panel that absorbed energy from the void without end. Then, it transformed the energy into energy through miraculous means. The increase in its lethality was not obvious yet, but its effect on the psychic wave network was immediate. Gao Meng couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. Interfering with the surrounding environment and forming a domain. That's F*King crazy. With this kind of operation, an extraordinary assassin can jump out at any time. People like us might as well just go lie dead. Under such a pressing situation, Ouyang Chen's reply was somewhat off-topic. I actually thought of Mo Luan. The assassin's body weight has dropped by 14 kilograms in 10 seconds, and the rate of decline is still increasing. Currently, his body fluid content is less than 40%, and his blood is almost completely empty. There are already problems with the normal operation of his body, but he's using an irreversible energy transformation method to avoid it and increase his efficiency. What comes next is definitely an explosive attack, and only one attack. Oh, Mo Luan's black soul body. Yes, if we had this kind of technology, perhaps Mo Luan would still be able to continue living, although it would be more difficult. Gao Meng rolled his eyes. Come on, if word of this gets out, you'll be the chief supporter of the clone technology. Is now the time to say such things? Ouyang Chen laughed. Times change, generations change. Our old friend is gone. We were born as humans, so we have to feel a little nostalgic. Everyone, return to your positions and follow the usual practice. Although there is interference, we also have the relevant contingency plan. The standard cannot be lowered, and we strive to raise the interference rate to above 25%. Although the situation was getting more and more urgent, Ouyang Chen's calmness still gave the maintenance team absolute confidence. The people who had gathered earlier dispersed and returned to their respective positions. An experimental assistant suddenly felt that his side was a little crowded. He turned his head and saw a familiar face. Hey, Charlie, you. Before his thoughts were completely clear, the central hub of the psychic wave network had already entered a full standby state. The relevant load was greatly increased, and the interference model was extracted from the relevant contingency plan and handed over to Ouyang Chen for final confirmation. Ouyang Chen stood in front of the central projector and pondered for a moment. He manually modified a few parameters, and after verifying it with the supercomputer, he began to load it. The entire process took about 3 seconds. At this time, the biker gang had already entered the 70-meter zone. What do you want to do? At this time, Gaudis saw Ouyang Chen's plan and raised his eyebrows. Logic world? This is still the safest. That's true. Gao Meng's expression became much better. The logic world mode was a new transformation of the psychic wave network. It represented the pinnacle of Ouyang Chen's extraordinary realm. It was also the culmination of the spatial fault and the extraordinary domain. It was truly the difference between heaven and earth. Back at Frost River Reality, Ouyang Chen had used the logic world to encircle all the elites of the Order of Justice in Xia City. He had also successfully resisted the attack of the outworld demon summoned by An Wang. In the end, he had even become the battlefield between Her Majesty Empress Wu and the Order of Justice's first ablatum. As long as the logic world was successfully set up, even if the opponent was a true extraordinary, the extraordinary would not be able to harm even a hair on Luo Nan and the others before they could break through the unfathomable space. Needless to say, this kind of crippled critical strike assassin was the final result. Their flesh and bones would turn to ash within the logic world, returning to nothingness. At this time, the person in charge of the scheduling team asked, "Should we proceed with resource protection?" The so-called resource protection referred to the temporary interruption of all services and functions of the psychic wave network. All resources would be tilted to ensure the completion of the logic world structure. Ouyang Chen shook his head. We can't withdraw from the plaza, and the city isn't stable. Don't restrict us. I'll just put in a bit more effort on my side. Gao Meng was a little surprised. This is very strenuous. Ouyang Chen slowly sat down and stared at the colorful projection. He said softly, the opponent only has the power to attack once. Whether he succeeds or not, he will die. Time is short, so the most important thing is to grasp the timing. It doesn't matter if it consumes energy or not. You're right. However, as long as the corresponding domain interference was in place, it was possible to destroy the rat tide network in advance. Perhaps we don't even have to completely set it up. I hope so. After saying that, Ouyang Chen closed his eyes and entered a wonderful and pure state. Gao Meng consciously took a step forward. While looking at Gu Ouyang Chen, he was also paying attention to the movements of Ku Wang's communications building, and was giving out on-the-spot commands. President, your psychic power has intervened. The interference rate on the scene has increased to 17%, 18%, 20%. The interference equipment on Boss is at full power. Very good. Temporarily allocate resources to maintain the network stability. Report the logic world's model conversion ratio. 66%. Gao Meng nodded. This conversion ratio meant that Ouyang Chen's progress in setting up the logic world was already 2/3 complete. The basic framework should have been set up. Just as he thought about it, another report came in. The enemy is 50 meters away. Before he finished speaking, the projector displayed the scene on the scene. A long "chi" sound rang out in the air inside the building. Following that, dense smoke and mist appeared out of thin air and spread out. This layer of smoke and mist appeared without reason. It was as if it came from every corner of the air. The temperature and density were extremely high. In an instant, it covered the upper half of the freight corridor, including the relevant floors. In the space of a breath, the human figure on the monitor screen became a little blurry. The thermal imaging system had almost completely stopped working. At this time, the staff's voice became hurried. The network interference rate has dropped by 7 points, 18%, 17%, the other side followed closely. The conversion ratio has dropped to 47% and is still dropping. Gao Meng instantly became excited. Fortunately, his many years of experience had allowed him to calm down. He immediately looked at Ouyang Chen and then looked at the relevant indicators. Only then did he say in a calm tone, "President, your psychic power output is stable. Continue to report the enemy's situation. They have temporarily stopped moving. Their weight is still dropping, but the rate of energy conversion has decreased." What about the rat tide? They are moving to the same side of the enemy. Their numbers have decreased. The specific details are still being calculated. Gao Meng truly relaxed. This is a stalemate caused by the interference of the supernatural domain. President Ouyang is already fighting the enemy. Temporary losses are nothing. Keep observing and report in time. After saying this, Gao Meng's gaze stopped on Ouyang Chen's face again. He felt a little strange. Why did it form a stalemate? Was it because the enemy had invested too many resources on the assassins that it was difficult to digest in one go? Or was it to further lock onto the real target? It couldn't be that his research addiction was acting up and he was trying to figure out the essence of the enemy, right? Just as he was thinking, he received a new situation. The secretary has used the plan reading authority. Forget it, let her be. She has full control of the scene anyway. Gao Meng was a little impressed. At this distance, the motorcycle gang would not even need a second to launch an assassination. He Yuan was still distracted by the plan at this time. Should he say that she had great willpower? But then again, no matter how strong the secretary was, she could not compare to the boss. Everyone else had already turned to face the enemy. Boss Luo was still in his original position. He did not know when his mind had wandered off. Didn't this group of fellows have a normal orientation? Luo Nan, who had a very normal orientation, was certainly unable to attend to other aspects right now. Moreover, his understanding of others was a bit lacking. He was using the interference of the soul cloak to fully perceive the changes in his surroundings. He could not attend to anything else. At this very moment, Luo Nan could truly feel the pressure transfer network constructed by the illusion of the rat tide. It had already established a close connection with the motorcycle gang. This did not mean that the physical distance between the two was rapidly shrinking. It could also mean that some sort of energy operation and transformation link had been established. From Luo Nan's perspective, the true function of the pressure transfer network was to draw in an extremely complex structure that came from the direction of the polar domain. It interfered with the extreme energy operation and transformation method of the motorcycle gang itself. In the blink of an eye, a terrifying scene of destruction was formed. The fundamental purpose of this scene was to rapidly transform the existence within the range of interference into an extremely destructive power. It also gave the existence a clear direction. Luo Nan was blocking the front. Luo Nan's heart was not fearful even though he clearly understood this. In fact, all his other emotions were washed away by an intense thought before they could display their effects. This was it. In that instant, Luo Nan clearly saw a special format that interfered with a special environment. It formed a model of a special scene. The last such model was President Ouyang's logic world. Just as he was thinking, something similar to the order and rules of the logic world really were playing around him. Was it an illusion? In any case, this really was a good reference. Luo Nan's impression became clearer. He remembered that President Ouyang's logic world was able to warp the mental and material planes. It formed a space-time fault that sat between reality and illusion. Its experimental nature was a bit stronger. It didn't have a clear inclination towards hostile combat. However, its structure was complex and rigorous. It was incomparably flexible. In comparison, the motorcycle gang and the rat tide jointly constructed a scene of destruction. It was completely born for slaughter. It used a high-level method similar to the conversion of mass and energy to realize the highly efficient transformation of energy forms. The microscopic plane was the raw material pool. The mental and material interference constructed the transformation reactor and the transmission bridge. Luo Nan observed this violent and grand structure with clairvoyance. After coming to a corresponding conclusion, he finally integrated his own reality into it. This toy was admittedly an excellent reference, but he would most likely not be able to find an opportunity to refer to it in the future if he allowed it to continue developing. Right now, the soul cloak was still fluttering in the void, but it was clearly affected by the scene of destruction. Especially when it brushed past the microscopic plane. It felt as if it was being scorched by a blazing flame. The corresponding order became scattered and scattered. It was nearly impossible to form. It even showed signs of withering for the first time. Luo Nan was able to confirm one thing from this. They interfered with each other. Due to the direct connection between the soul cloak and the condensation ring, the water molecules were quite active wherever it went. The energy transformation process driven by the scene of destruction was mainly heat energy. It was inevitable that a certain amount of loss would occur in these places where water vapor was rich. All of this was clearly engraved in Luo Nan's mind. Interfere with it. Destroy it. Maybe add a few auxiliary structures. Forget about it. The more Luo Nan became familiar with the soul cloak, the clearer he understood that the condensation ring was on one level among the main and 5 auxiliary structures that made up the dripping sword. The other 5 auxiliary structures were on another level, and the gap between the 2 levels was enormous. The condensation ring was the true core of the microscopic world. It touched upon the level of molecules and atoms. The other 5 auxiliary structures at most guided and utilized the beads of water condensed by the condensation ring. It was no wonder that President Ouyang had only skimmed over the 5 auxiliary structures in his evaluation of the dripping sword during the intermediate training class of the Xia City branch. Only the condensation ring was heavily colored and full of praise. Because of this, the other 5 auxiliary structures were far from being qualified to be used on the level of the soul cloak. Right now, Luo Nan could either develop an application method based on the characteristics of the condensation ring, or he could use other methods to interfere. Luo Nan chose the latter without any hesitation. Before he could understand the fundamental nature of the condensation ring's affinity with water molecules, any application development would be the ravings of a lunatic. As for other methods of interference, they could be used on this level. At the very least, they had to be able to touch upon the polar domain and the microscopic world. There was only one method that Luo Nan could think of in a short amount of time to possess these prerequisites. Crash. The familiar vibration of the heavily chained crow spread out in Luo Nan's mind. Luo Nan's lips opened and closed slightly. He silently recited the mantra of, "My heart's a prison." With the condensation ring transformed from the peripheral neuron of his brain as the core, 6 illusory rays of light appeared at the same time. 3 rays of light crisscrossed to form 4 ends. They joined together to form a proper tetrahedron in the void. They then formed an external and inscribed sphere, constructing the visualization diagram of formatting theory. The crashing vibrations grew clearer and clearer, but the heavily chained crow never appeared. Instead, the visualization diagram suddenly flared outward with Luo Nan at its center, expanding in all directions. According to the principles that Luo Nan had just comprehended, the heavily chained crow should be the interference diagram formed by Luo Nan's self-format acting on himself and the surrounding external environment. In this sense, the nature of the heavily chained crow and the soul cloak were the same. It was just that the heavily chained crow occupied a more fundamental position. After all, Luo Nan's foundation was built upon the foundation of the format wheel. Luo Nan used coupling theory to improve it. He used his vast and boundless soul strength as the God gear, and he used his own body cultivation as the body gear. They interfered and coupled with each other to form an order frame. This was Luo Nan's major format, his fundamental format. The condensation ring was more like an advanced plug-in that was made to deal with the special circumstances of soul strength. It allowed Luo Nan's inexhaustible soul strength to truly interfere with the material plane outside of Luo Nan's body. At this stage, Luo Nan had no intention of investigating the difference in status between the two, but he knew that he needed to tightly combine the two interference diagrams. He needed to use his most fundamental strength in reality through the most unobstructed channel. His thoughts were clear, and the two interference diagrams suddenly fused together, fully combining together. As the visualization diagram expanded outwards, Luo Nan vaguely felt that the nimble cloak that fluttered and danced in the air seemed to be branded with a layer of faint patterns. The patterns were like chains that twisted and extended. The feeling of nimbleness and emptiness gradually faded away, and what replaced it was an unprecedented sluggishness. It was as if the entire world was born upon the fluttering cloak. Soon, the cloak stopped fluttering, but the expanding momentum of the scene of destruction had unwittingly recovered. It stretched out in all directions with an even more astonishing extent. The cloak was transforming. Under the interaction of the two interference images, it was as if a large tent had been set up. There was clearly a marvelous difference between the inside and outside of the tent. It was a difference in order. The true meaning of Luo Nan's order frame was expressed beneath the cover of the cloak. Outside the cloak was a domain that Luo Nan was unable to touch and influence. Luo Nan suddenly understood. He was truly expanding his self-format to the real world through the soul cloak. It was used on his own body, and it was used on the vaster material plane. A mere tent was far inferior to the exemplary form of the logic world in terms of rigor and stability when it came in contact with the scene of destruction. However, it was enough to form interference and obstruction for a structure that was inherently violent and turbulent. The water molecules gathered by the soul cloak converged at an even higher efficiency under the law and order of the visualization diagram in the short span of a single breath. They constructed a simple yet relatively complete defensive line. A long ripping sound rang out from within the building with a radius of 300 meters at practically the same time. On the visible, conventional plane, a large expanse of smoke and mist rose. But in the microscopic world, it looked more like a pot of half-cooked porridge spilled all over the ground. As for the more profound plane of the polar domain, the formation of rules that descended down collided with Luo Nan's expanded visualization diagram. In that instant, the efficiency of interference with the material plane was cut by at least half. The desolate cavity went astray for a time, becoming completely unrecognizable. The problem was that the power of the scene of destruction was still extremely powerful. The desolate cavity only went astray for a short period of time. The strength of the soul cloak wasn't enough to truly withstand the impact when the energy it transformed was instinctively stimulated. The microscopic world surged once more in the blink of an eye, and the tense defensive line was immediately smashed to pieces. The impact of the backlash was directed straight at Luo Nan's brain, straight at the core structure of the external neuron. Boom! The oppressive sound wave manifested in the conventional region. The backlash of the scene of destruction didn't directly blast Luo Nan's brain to pieces. Instead, it smashed into an even vaster interference scene. This brand new scene possessed a vast space and leeway to interfere with and buffer the flow of energy within the scene of destruction. It was like pouring large amounts of ice water into a reactor. Or perhaps it should be said the other way around. It was like throwing the reactor into the vast and ice-cold deep sea. It used highly efficient condensation of water molecules as the material foundation. It caused an even greater amount of water vapor to pervade the air as it collided with the scene of destruction. Its astonishingly high heat capacity was no different from a wall of size for a method of energy transformation that used heat as its main component. Yes, Luo Nan's vast and majestic soul strength truly had the space to display itself with the soul cloak's conduction. In this moment, he practically moved the entire majestic iceberg ocean of his god gear down. It formed interference with the water molecules on the material plane, creating a scene of the deep sea. Of course, the deep sea diagram could also transform into a cloak. It soared and fluttered, drowning an even vaster heaven and earth. Luo Nan's breathing became hurried. However, he was able to split a bit of his mind at this time to pay attention to the changes in the outside world. He wanted to see what the effects of his move were in reality. The motorcycle gang had stopped, and the scale of the rat tide had clearly shrunk. This was excellent. Luo Nan's mind was delighted. This was because of the formation of the deep sea diagram, and because of the correct judgment of timing. If he were to confront the enemy head-on, he wouldn't have the qualifications to resist the motorcycle gang's overwhelming impact in the real world. And if he were to completely engage in a mental clash, the enemy could evade it. Only by placing the battlefield on the interference scene that was half real and half illusory, blocking the connection point of the enemy's mental and material interactions, effectively disrupting the flow of the enemy's operations. Only then would he be able to obtain such impressive results. Next. Information flowed like water in the mission channel. In summary, President Ouyang had used the logic world to interfere from a distance, destroying the enemy's critical strike domain. Right now, the two sides were still in a stalemate. The staff members of the Psychic Wave Network maintenance team didn't have Luo Nan's complicated mental state. They had incomparable confidence in Ouyang Chen. So when they confirmed the scene of the rat tide's phantom distorting and collapsing on the monitoring screen, they relaxed one by one, even though the stalemate data was still quite low. At this time, a certain lab assistant picked up the thread of thought that had been severed. "Charlie, why are you here?" "The maintenance team. You don't need to worry about that side." Charlie smiled as he turned to look at the control panel. The straight line distance between here and that side was only 12 meters, and there were practically no obstructions. Right now, Gao Meng was standing in front of the control panel, overseeing the overall situation in Ouyang Chen's place. As for Ouyang Chen himself, most of his mind was submerged into the psychic wave network. He was engaged in a domain interference confrontation with the powerful enemy several dozen kilometers away. An ideal opportunity. Charlie was like a normal patrolling staff member. He carried his toolbox and left the place where he had just been residing. He lowered his head slightly and approached the control panel without batting an eyelid. He had only taken 2 steps when the lab assistant behind him thought of something. He exerted force with his feet and used the usual swivel chair sliding technique of a technical geek. The man and the chair slid to Charlie's side. "Oh right, Charlie. You just so happen to be here. Can you help me take a look?" Holy crap. The eyes of the lab assistant nearly popped out. In just 2 steps, Charlie's relatively familiar face had already warped and shriveled. It was shriveled and dehydrated. The insides of his eyes had completely collapsed into 2 empty holes. Most of his bodily fluids had evaporated and transformed, forming a seemingly substantial red light that shuttled back and forth within the empty holes of his facial features. This scene was far too horrifying. The lab assistant's bottom line of mental endurance was instantly broken under the close proximity of Charlie. He let out a blood-curdling shriek and tumbled to the ground along with his chair. He nearly fainted from the fall. Charlie had no interest in the lab assistant who was screaming and groaning miserably by his feet. He bent his body slightly and suddenly exerted force. He charged in a straight line toward the control panel that was only 10 meters away. A sharp alarm rang out. The sudden appearance of an abnormal energy reaction in the core area had activated the laboratory's defense system. At this moment, Gao Meng, who was overseeing the entire situation in front of the control panel, shifted his gaze over and coincidentally met with the shriveled and withered face. The distance between them was already less than 5 meters. Gao Meng's pupils shrank slightly when he first saw an enemy with this appearance. However, his reaction was also extremely fast. Without moving his limbs, he only used his soul energy to stimulate the Hexa-ear terminal and instantly activated emergency safety mode. The sound of an electric current rang out. A dark blue electric net instantly spread out around the control panel. Under the effect of a strong magnetic field, the high-voltage electric current formed a ring-shaped defense circle, isolating the inside from the outside. Even a rank B powerhouse would have to be prepared to turn into charcoal if they directly charged over. Chapter 488. Oh no. The next moment, the numbness from the ionization in the air disappeared. A huge gap appeared in the center of the electric net defense circle. The electric potential difference caused a high voltage to break through the air, forming a dazzling electric arc that bombarded the intruder's body. It was also at this moment that Gao Meng clearly saw the withered face revealing a satisfied smile. The intruder's body suddenly burst into flames, but the flames were a demonic dark red. In this strangely restrained and restrained flame, the figure's body instantly turned into ashes from the shoulder down, but the head and face remained intact. The red light from the facial orifices was so bright that it made one's scalp go numb. Gao Meng saw the red light shooting out from the withered head's eye sockets, brushing past his shoulder and heading straight for Ouyang Chen, who was still in a meditative state. His scalp was about to explode. For rays of clear light rushed out from his body and formed a defensive barrier. He had indeed intercepted it, but the feeling of contact between the two parties made his heart sink. The seemingly fierce red light was almost like nothingness when touched. It had no impact at all. Gao Meng tried his best to detect the real situation. With his B-rank psychic ability, he could vaguely feel that there seemed to be a buzzing sound at a deeper level of interference from the red light. It was as if a giant crossbow had been set up with its tendons stretched open, accumulating an immeasurable amount of power and aiming in Ouyang Chen's direction. The clear light barrier formed by Gao Meng's talismans not only did not obstruct the opponent, but it was like a ruler that helped the opponent to adjust his position in the depths of the void until he fired. At this moment, Gao Meng's mind was blank. He only felt that the clear light barrier he had set up was like 4 layers of thin gauze clouds that were instantly blown away without a trace. There was only an extremely tyrannical pure power that tore through the void and penetrated straight down. Perhaps it was only for 1,000th of a second, but an intense light burst out and a destructive power erupted in an instant. The sound of the explosion was like thunder, and the structure of the building where it was also collapsed. Gao Meng let out a muffled groan as his body was blown away by the impact of the storm. Along the way, he collided with many tables and chairs in the air. More than 100 protective talismans spontaneously ignited, but the sky was still dark, and he did not know where he was going. In the end, Gao Meng fell on the ruins of a console, bricks, and rebars. His whole body was in pain, and his ears were still ringing. He had lost his sense of balance. What was even more tragic was that his soul power was forcibly pushed out of the abyss by the powerful impact. It bounced out from the deep layer all the way until it reached the shallow layer closest to the material plane. Only then did it barely stabilize, but it was still a little blurry. However, he couldn't care less about these things. He gritted his teeth and struggled to get up. He wanted to see the consequences of the impact. However, because he had not completely digested the impact, he could not focus his vision for a moment. His vision swept across the surrounding area in a daze, and he was confused by the broken and messy buildings. After swaying a few times, he finally figured out the central area that had suffered the heaviest damage. He locked onto the decayed head that was still floating in midair. Extraordinary. The destructive effect on the material plane and the tyrannical impact on the mental plane combined to form a terrifying oppressive force. This was the level of an extraordinary. Of course, Gao Meng knew the despairing gap between an architect and a transcendent. But at this moment, there was no place for fear in the surging emotions in his heart. He just let out a howl and rushed up. However, before he could get up, he suddenly turned his head, turned his eyes, and looked back and forth. Suddenly, he let out a laugh and couldn't help but laugh. Hee hee, where's everyone? Although 3 to 5 floors of the building had collapsed and become unrecognizable, this was the Shangding building without a doubt. The problem was, where were the permanent staff members here? Where were the engineers and technicians of the maintenance team on the 13th floor, which was full of laboratories? If it had really been bombarded, this place should have been a mess of casualties. However, other than the miserable ruins and him, there was not a single living thing around him. It was cold, bleak, eerie, and very strange. But Gao Meng liked it very much. He slapped his thigh and laughed completely. This was the logic world. This was clearly a spatial fault. Moreover, according to the stable structure of the void around him, he had not suffered a fatal impact. This proved that Ouyang Chen was still alive and well. He was able to maintain this magnificent and rigorous magical world. Ouyang, where are you? Where I am. Ouyang Chen's reply was timely. At the same time, his figure appeared in the void where only the withered head was left. He was still wearing the white coat he was used to wearing in the laboratory. His entire body was spotless and he looked rather calm. Gao Meng laughed and cursed. He followed the edge of the broken crack and with a few leaps, he returned to the 13th floor. He didn't know how the logic world was set up, nor did he know how Ouyang Chen was able to take care of both sides and complete such an extremely difficult technical move. It could be said that his heart was filled with question marks, but in the end, he only spat. Are you filming? Why did you end up like this? Sorry. I kept trying to wrap something up, but I didn't succeed. Instead, I gave the other party a chance. In a moment of desperation, there was a problem with the chi identification and I got you involved. It's my fault. Gao Meng didn't really understand and could only stare at the first question. Which thing? Ouyang Chen didn't speak again. During this process, he didn't move his gaze. Gao Meng looked over and stared at the withered head. At this moment, light flowed and overlapped in Ouyang Chen's eyes. The effect of his extraordinary power directly caused the brightness and darkness of the void in front of him, the layers, the structure, and the dimensions to change. This caused the area where the withered head was to become transparent. The unrecognizable laboratory ruins turned into an illusory silhouette, including the withered head itself. However, as the transparency increased, a turbid mist-like shadow gradually appeared in the area where the floating head was. It was generally a dark gray color and there was a faint smoke billowing at its edges. Gao Meng's gaze was unconsciously attracted to it. After looking for a long time, he felt that something could emerge from the irregular shadow at any time. Right now, the billowing smoke was perhaps the poisonous breath. Therefore, Gao Meng understood what Ouyang Chen meant when he said he didn't succeed. This shadow was clearly something that was independent of the laws of the logic world. It was like an eroded wound that destroyed the integrity of the logic world. Oh, could it be that the extraterrestrial ballista came from here? It feels a little familiar. I think it was that time at Frost River Reality. Gao Meng was talking about the battle with the Order of Justice at the Frost River Reality flagship store on Fudong Avenue last month. Although he had not personally participated in the battle, he had seen the relevant reports. The circle of shadows before him was vaguely similar to the giant shadow arm that had turned the logic world upside down. However, the one Wang had attracted at all costs was like a demon from beyond the heavens. It was valiant, berserk, and unparalleled. The shadow in front of him had only eroded an opening and built a channel to transmit and control power. It seemed to be lacking in terms of level. As he spoke, Gao Meng looked at the unrecognizable building. He had fallen all the way down just now. He knew that at least 4 or 5 floors had directly collapsed. Even if the building was created from the logic world, its structural strength would not be any less. A single strike was enough to destroy it to this extent. It was not much different from a tactical missile. Gao Meng could not help but think of the treacherous method that the other party had used to bombard him with. If this method could be used at will, then wouldn't all living things in the world, be they ordinary people or ability users, be they not at their mercy? Gao Meng felt a deep chill when he thought of this. At this time, Ouyang Chen's analysis of the shadow had come to an end. He changed his method and suddenly asked, "Who are you?" Gao Meng was slightly startled. A deep and magnetic voice spread through the void. A lucky explorer, a clumsy researcher, but also a qualified businessman. One could see that even though the withered head was only an outline under Ouyang Chen's analysis, it still made a clear and sinister smile. It was a stark contrast to the pure and deep voice that possessed an extremely professional style. It was this floating head in the shadow that became the medium for both parties to communicate. "My career has just started. I need to find a few investors to share the risks. I came uninvited today to recommend myself. I hope President Ouyang doesn't mind." Ouyang Chen calmly responded, "I mind very much." "Then I'm really sorry. I admit that today's exchange was a bit impromptu, but we can try to make it a real demonstration. President Ouyang is a veteran extraordinary. You have exceptional insight. In your opinion, do you think that the methods I brought out today have the qualifications to cooperate with the Xia City branch?" Gao Meng cursed in his heart. The other party really did put on a negotiating posture. Whether it's cloning technology or the plain function, this method of free communication in the logic realm, we can use it to discuss. I believe that the Xia City branch has enough capital to carry out an exchange. Ouyang Chen waited for him to finish speaking and asked, "How should I address you?" "Luo Yuan." Gao Meng noticed that this was a sensitive name that had just entered the database not too long ago. Ouyang Chen didn't seem to notice this. He immediately said, "Mr. Luo, do you know the name of the person you possess?" "I think it's Charlie." "Yes. He came here to apply for a job 12 years ago. He is now the father of 2 children. I've seen their children and have given one of them a name." "Oh, that's really unfortunate." "All right, I understand what President Ouyang means. The threshold of morality is always laughable and makes people feel helpless." Luo Yuan sighed, but he still wanted to fight. "As a whole, don't you think the Xia City branch needs to discuss? I think there are many people in Xia City who need to know the right to know. For example, Elder Yu Gang. He is old. Doesn't he want to prolong his life? Another example is Her Majesty Empress Wu. She has the heart of the world and is a hero of the present age. Doesn't she want to go a step further? There are also some youngsters who are quite ambitious. They urgently need the ability to match their ambition. If President Ouyang Gang is arbitrary." A cold light seeped out from Ouyang Chen's eyes behind his glasses. "I am the president and an extraordinary. I can't be willful even at this point." "What's the point?" "All right, I was thinking too much." The withered head opened and closed its mouth, transmitting Luo Yuan's deep and melodious laughter. "Perhaps President Ouyang and I are incompatible. Nothing will come of it if I stay here with you. Since this is the case, the intentions of other investors are very important. Therefore, I have another question. President Ouyang was able to turn over in time once. Can you turn over a second time?" Ouyang Chen stared at the shadow behind the head in silence. "I'll sell myself and boast for a moment. In some areas, my plane is more convenient than the president's psychic wave network. It's much more convenient." Amidst the loud laughter, the withered head that Luo Yuan controlled turned into smoke and dissipated without a trace. At the same time, the color of the shadow faded away. It gradually merged with the background of nothingness and returned to nothingness. The hole that probed into the logic world was closed by the other party. Ouyang Chen's eyes focused. He didn't say anything. He waved his hand and the void structure of the logic world disintegrated and returned to the plane of reality along with Gao Meng. In the blink of an eye, they were surrounded by the buzzing of the maintenance team's laboratory. At this time, the group of technicians were still in a daze. They were restless because of the emergency mode. When they saw Ouyang Chen and Gao Meng, who had disappeared for almost 2 minutes, appear again in their original positions, some people couldn't help but cheer. At this time, the ability users who stayed behind in the Shangding building had long since been alarmed. Elder Yu, who had been recuperating on the 12th floor, directly sent over a telepathic inquiry. But Ouyang Chen didn't have the time to explain. He just said to Gao Meng, "You take command." Then he entered a meditative state. Gao Meng was a bit confused, but he knew where he should put his effort. He immediately pressed the control panel and issued an order. Enter resource protection mode in all areas except the municipal square. Increase the interference rate of the Kuwang Communications building with all your strength. Request the SCA to provide support to the energy center. No, bypass them. Just use emergency authority. Hurry. These words were transmitted through telepathy. If it could be done directly, it was done at the first instance. At the same time, he received the latest data, interference rate 20%. Model conversion ratio 35%. It was already amazing to be able to reach this level in the beginning. But after seeing Luo Yuan's inconceivable dimensional ballista, Gao Meng felt the corresponding numbers completely stagnate. Then he thought of something else. He directly transferred the command to the mission channel and sent an alert to the Kuwang Communications building. Move irregularly. Don't stay where you are. Gao Meng really didn't know whether his judgment was right or wrong. But he knew very well that Luo Yuan's dimensional ballistic cannon technique would be 100% certain death if Luo Nan and the others stayed where they were. Only when he sent the command did he discover that the other side had already begun to move. The mission channel still retained the warning and command from 5 seconds ago. Luo Nan, the enemy is making a big move. Hurry up and leave. He Yuayin, don't scatter. Format space synchronization. Cat eyes, bring the others. The group had already smashed through the side walls of the passageway and entered the office area of the building. The 3 deep blue walkers set up their formatting domain, wrapping Luo Nan and Cat Eyes within. They sped along the way, getting farther and farther away from the landing pad. Luo Nan ran madly the entire way. The structure of his body and soul was a bit shaken. The deep sea scene produced by interference rippled slightly, but it was nothing compared to the sudden surge of impact from the other side. He gasped for breath with some difficulty and locked onto the location of the motorcycle gang in the depths of the thick smoke. He had indeed noticed a few seconds ago that the enemy's operation method was a bit different from the previous assassin and pressure transfer network. A power that came from the depths of the polar domain or even the distant deep space directly interfered with this area. The motorcycle gang, who was previously an assassin, was now more like a ruler, a tool to lock onto and aim. However, Luo Nan's deep sea interference scene continued to work, causing this area to become a relatively unfriendly area. It affected the accuracy of his positioning, forcing the other side to make a compromise. They did their best to allow the motorcycle gang to approach their location. Because of this, the motorcycle gang had changed from his previous stagnant state of a few dozen seconds ago. His figure sped forward like a violent storm, but the appearance of his sudden advance was truly bloody and terrifying. With every step he took, from the bottom to the top, including his legs, torso, and head, a part of his body would explode into a bloody mist. However, after the explosion, it would all be collected back into his damaged body. Then, it would expand and explode even more areas. His body had been eroded before, but it was not as bitter and direct as it was now. In a mere 2 or 3 seconds, not a single piece of flesh remained intact on his entire body. Even his legs and feet were gone. He was not running, he was shuttling back and forth under the catalysis of the bloody mist. In the end, all of his body parts exploded cleanly into pieces, leaving only an outstretched arm. And this arm rapidly expanded as the bloody mist poured in. Dark green veins coiled around it, and it was as thick as a demon's claw. It tore through the air. Luo Nan's breathing became even more labored. From his perspective, this demon's claw was a murderous weapon that could chase after a soul and take away a life. It was also an aiming device for some even more terrifying weapon. It looked like one body, but it was actually 2 wheels. Compared to the bloody scene on the material plane, he was more worried about the incorporeal killing power behind the deep space. But the more realistic situation was that the demon's claw's assault was already enough to take their lives. The path of the demon's assault was an absolute straight line, and the surroundings of the claw surged with a fatal vortex of energy. The thin smoke in the office area dissipated in a single sweep before it could truly break through. The entire area seemed to have transformed into a blast furnace for smelting iron. Surging waves of heat swept across. It was enough to transform a person's body and soul as they approached. Crash. The floor was like a crispy biscuit. Half of it collapsed in an instant, and the tremors of Luo Nan's group brought the other half of the floor down. The 5 people fell at the same time. The kinetic energy of their running was transformed, and they went all the way down. And the terrifying demon's claw charged up diagonally. The timing was grasped to the point of despair. God and Si Guoxing put on their most professional performance at this time. They clearly knew that the attack from behind was terrifying, but they forcefully maneuvered without the slightest hesitation. Their bodies merged inwards to block the front of the demon's claw's assault. But they were still too slow. The demon's claw exploded apart bit by bit in the instant they merged inwards to block the attack. It was like a multi-stage rocket from the olden days. Every time a segment exploded, its speed would increase by a notch. By the time all the flesh and blood of the single protruding index finger had exploded, this broken finger, which was about the size of a traditional bullet, had already broken through 7 times the speed of sound. It was like an electromagnetic rifle had opened fire. It directly passed through the gap between the 2 deep blue walkers that had yet to close up. It also pierced through the formatted domain and penetrated inside. Ding! An arc of light suddenly flashed, revealing an inconceivable trajectory. It accurately blocked the path of the broken finger, and then powerful kinetic energy instantly transformed into an ear-piercing sonic boom. Chapter 489. Interference rate 25%. Model conversion ratio 52%. Fluctuating. He Yueyin wasn't like Luo Nan. Her senses could cross multiple dimensions to lock onto an unmanifested threat. But her combat intuition, honed over the years, gave her a premonition to deal with fatal threats. Aside from this, the concrete data reflected the problem even more prominently. The interference rate and conversion ratio fluctuated clearly. The rising momentum slowed, but the domain interference was still there. The great enemy was still there. It did not end because of the flesh and blood fingers exploding. This was a fatal moment. Luo Nan and the others fell from the collapsed floor. Under these circumstances, He Yueyin had exhausted all of her abilities to use a sharp blade to split open the fingers that were exploding at 7 times the speed of sound. But the instant the flesh and blood exploded was the moment when a terrifying force of another level was released. No matter how amazing He Yueyin was, it was impossible for her to gather her strength and resist the impact of a bullet that was on a level far above the speed of sound. The enemy clearly had an overwhelming advantage, but they just had to grasp the rhythm of attacking the weak. They were calm and callous, not giving anyone a chance. The group was still in the process of falling when the outer layer of the exoskeleton armor of the 3 deep blue walkers at the front suddenly exploded with fine sparks of electricity. The tough armor structure even underwent minute deformations. All the sensor devices went off in alarm. The corresponding impact had far exceeded the protective limits of the exoskeleton armor. And this was after the formatted domain had buffered them. He Yueyin issued a warning, splash evasion. Cat Eyes let out a muffled groan. Her naturally spread open upper arms suddenly exploded with a bloody light. A terrifying gap appeared, exposing dense white bone. She didn't panic in the face of danger. Before the pain could truly take shape, she forcefully pulled back and curled into a ball, doing her best to reduce the area of contact with the outside world. Fortunately, she reacted in time. Light sounds rang out in the surrounding air. Those were the sonic booms of the exploding finger fragments streaking through the void. Every sound represented a terrifying killing power that could pierce through flesh and blood. And at this moment, the area several dozen meters around them emitted gurgling water vapor once more. It was as if a sauna was covering their heads, hot and humid. They crashed into the floor under the cover of the water vapor. Then they shot backward, wanting to forcefully charge out of the area covered by the flesh and blood fragments. Not good. This won't do. Luo Nan nearly bit off his teeth. From his perspective, the exploding flesh and blood were not just a fired bullet. They themselves were a taut bowstring on another level. A terrifying storm was brewing on the microscopic plane, connecting with the source of power in the distant deep space. Luo Nan utilized this power to the limit. Even if there were only milligrams of flesh and blood nearby, the power would burst forth, enough to grind them into dust. Luo Nan spared no effort to increase the structural strength of the interference scene. He strove to destroy the connection, and he did indeed achieve some results. Deep Space's fatal arrow didn't shoot at the first moment because the bowstring was affected by the effects of the deep sea map. It could only vibrate at the bottom of the sea and was obstructed. The surrounding water vapor was the result of this interference. The most critical problem was that the enemy had a real and practical fulcrum on the material plane. Even if the former biker gang had exploded, the flesh and blood fragments were still there. The foundation of the manipulation was still there. Even if it was only at the micron scale, it was enough to be used. As for Luo Nan himself, even though he was a living person placed here, he did not possess the strength and level to support the deep sea map to interfere with the material plane a step further. With the strength of Luo Nan's current body, he didn't even have the qualifications to forcefully do it. At this moment, the disturbances within the range of the interference scene accelerated the collision between particles. Soul power interweaved in a miraculous manner, as though an unprecedented and wondrous world had been formed in an instant. However, purely using soul power to interfere with the material world was only a basic framework, dividing out a bit of space within the inherent structure of the world. This space was unstable, and he needed to pour more power into it. Something had to be added to the balance between nothingness and reality. Something had to be added to make this world of nothingness tilt towards the material plane. Who should I fill? At this moment, his closed system arranged all the elements in front of him and began to deduce them layer by layer. His thoughts might have spun thousands of times, or it might have been a flash of inspiration that really allowed him to find a bargaining chip that he could either put in or abandon. The external neuron trembled. At the core of the condensation ring, an even finer and more intricate structure was formed. It guided the soul energy and interfered with the image of the deep sea. Luo Nan's mind went blank. Most of his accumulated soul strength was instantly sucked out and coiled in the void. It formed a new structure, erected in the middle of two distant voids. A marvelous door opened, blowing misty clouds into the two unfathomable worlds of the void. One was the cloud world. The other was the image of the deep sea produced by the interference. Only the two had nothing to do with the real world. In the next second, an enormous hairy arm stretched out from the spatial door. Each arm was over 2 meters long, and it made a standard posture of cross-defense. Such an enormous being could not be more striking, even in the depths of the mist. However, the others were completely unaware of this, including He Yuan, who was carrying Luo Nan as she ran. This was because Luo Nan pulled apart the distance between him and the surrounding people the instant the spatial passageway was erected. Perhaps it was due to the difference in dimensions. In any case, the independent space, which was abnormally active with water molecules, was truly supported. It was faintly discernible, faintly distant, faintly illusory. In the previous instant, the fatal arrow had been launched, casting the shadow of a certain world down. However, the process from the moment it was launched to the moment it landed had already become a mote. The mush-mouth ape Yuan Yi's enormous arm instantly combusted in the region where water molecules were abundant. Perhaps it turned into ashes, or perhaps some charcoal remained. It let out a pained roar, but this roar only exploded in the cloud world. Even though a bit of the aftermath seeped in occasionally, it merely reverberated within the water world Luo Nan had created. It was annihilated without a trace. However, the world constructed from the deep sea map shook intensely at this time. It began to collapse layer by layer. The hurricane of impact blew over, causing Luo Nan to suddenly understand. No matter what kind of space it was, he was the center of the world. It would be fine if the impact force was consumed, but if there was any left over, he would be the first to bear the brunt. Did he get himself trapped? However, Sister Yuan and the others should be much better off. Before he could finish his thought, the interference components attached to his skin-tight protective suit heated up. A familiar sense of order expanded from his body, rapidly spreading outwards. The logic world. In an instant, the deep-sea map, the enemy's fatal domain, the logic world, and the cloud world, which projected a bit of a shadow, twisted into a ball. A shattered maelstrom and warped laws burst forth in an instant, sweeping everyone's consciousness away from the polar domain. Luo Nan's mind went blank. The feeling of extreme weakness was like the pitch-black wings of a crow covering him. It made everything before his eyes turn dark. There was no longer any light. What did it feel like to be a thief, to be empty? Or perhaps he should ask, what did it feel like to be a bottomless pit? Luo Nan captured his self-awareness from his drowsiness due to lack of oxygen in his brain, and he inexplicably had this thought. He knew the reason why he felt like a thief, to be empty. It was mainly because he had forcefully linked the illusory space and time of the deep-sea map with the cloud world. At the same time, he had constructed a spatial skeleton and a passage between the two worlds. This had instantly extracted all of his soul strength. Although he was short of oxygen, he did not faint. During this process, he clearly knew that the closed system that belonged to him, which was the large production line formed by his believers, was still operating non-stop, producing a huge amount of soul power that was constantly being replenished. But the problem was that with the powerful production capacity of the large production line, after a period of time, a certain amount of reserves should be provided to alleviate the predicament of a dried-up lamp. But Luo Nan could clearly feel his soul strength pour out in torrents at an extremely stable and heroic speed. Could it be that he had become a large sieve after receiving a strike from the dimensional crossbow? Oh, the term dimensional crossbow was something he had gathered from the outside world while he was in a drowsy state. Luo Nan's dried-up mental strength took a slight turn for the better, and he forced himself to rouse his mind. He extended his consciousness in the direction of the pouring soul strength. In a moment of absent-mindedness, his telepathic thoughts cut into the cloud world where chaotic clouds flew about. The spatial passage was still there. Luo Nan felt the violent trembling of the air current in the clouds before he could finish his thought. The source was none other than Yuan Yi, who had forcefully blocked the dimensional crossbow's long-distance attack. Yuan Yi was swinging his already crippled arms as he roared madly. Admittedly, the destruction of his arms was one of the reasons for Yuan Yi's wretched cries, but the destructive power of an extraordinary was the source of his greatest pain. The mushed-mouth ape possessed an extremely powerful regenerative ability, but no matter how its wounded body regenerated, it was destroyed by the destructive power once more. This process repeated over and over again, bringing about enormous pain. Yuan Yi howled miserably to the heavens, and the enormous sound wave covered a vast area of several hundred kilometers. It shook the sea of clouds to churn, sending ice crystals flying in all directions, and surging waves. Yuan Yi's howls of pain attracted quite a few of his kind to spectate. The corresponding mental senses shuttled back and forth in all directions, but Yuan Yi couldn't care less. Huh? Why do I know what happened several hundred kilometers away? Luo Nan's mind trembled, and he took advantage of the situation to spread it out. Soon, he had a general understanding of what had happened. The soul cloak, the deep sea scene. They had truly given him a great surprise. He had once believed that the deep sea scene formed from interference in the previous battle had suffered the impact of the dimensional crossbow, and that it had broken down and collapsed. But from the looks of it now, there were still some skeletons left behind. The corresponding laws and powers also remained. It was just that the bit that remained was linked to the temporary pillar, Yuan Yi. It was struck by the powerful impact into the spatial passageway and poured into the cloud world. It would have been fine if this was all. With its incomplete structure, it would naturally collapse without the support of sufficient interference power. But perhaps Yuan Yi's pillar was remarkable, or perhaps the effects of the soul cloak were special, or perhaps the cloud world was a region rich in water molecules. Of course, there were other reasons as well. In any case, the deep sea scene, this special soul cloak, gradually recovered and became complete during this time when Luo Nan's mental strength was exhausted. Moreover, it continued to drift in the cloud world, spreading layer by layer. Right now, Luo Nan's first impression of the deep sea scene was that it was large. It was inconceivably large. For a time, he was actually unable to calculate just how wide of a region this special soul cloak covered after drifting and spreading over this period of time. He only knew that the range of his mental senses, which he was once so proud of, was like a temporary shack when compared to this vast region. It was similar to the enormous metropolis of Xia City. He just wanted to use the range of his senses as a standard unit of measurement, but this unit was so small that it was meaningless. In this way, the source of the bottomless pit was revealed. Even though Luo Nan's accumulated soul strength was like a vast ocean of glaciers under the soul cloak mode, it was still insufficient for him to scatter it over such a vast cloud world and sufficiently interfere. Looking at it from a different angle, Luo Nan had yet to be sucked dry under such a terrifying momentum of expansion. This made Luo Nan look at Luo Nan with a whole new level of respect for his closed system large production line. At this very moment, the soul cloak was pulling Luo Nan's consciousness to wander within the boundless and boundless layers of clouds. An interference scene of this scale could truly be described as grand and spectacular. Luo Nan really was excited for a period of time, but his thoughts changed once his initial mood passed. It seemed to be meaningless. Luo Nan felt that this was very inconceivable. His interference scene and the corresponding range of his senses had already expanded to this degree, but he was still unable to discover the edge of this cloud world. He was unable to discover the corresponding source of the bloody light reflected and flowing between the clouds. This world seemed to be practically the same up, down, left, and right. Or perhaps it was an infinite reproduction of a limited picture. There were practically no changes in this world other than the mushed-mouth apes that flew and wandered about. Luo Nan was finally convinced that this was a maze world constructed from the light of blood, energy, and clouds. If he didn't grasp the key to solving this maze, he wouldn't be able to gain anything new even if he multiplied the range of the soul cloak by 100 times. Luo Nan's mind stirred when his thoughts reached this point, and the expansion speed of the soul cloak clearly slowed down. Originally, he wanted to completely stop this meaningless expansion, but when the soul cloak's expansion speed decreased to a certain extent, he made a new discovery. The growth of his soul strength had clearly sped up, but it didn't return to the unbearable degree of before. Consumption and growth had reached an excellent equilibrium. This was also possible. Luo Nan was overjoyed. If he could use the soul cloak to effectively control the equilibrium between his body and soul, to reach the point where he could adjust the growth of his soul strength at will, to increase or decrease it at will, then he would be profiting no matter what. Luo Nan thought about the scene. When facing an enemy, his body and soul were coordinated as one, linked together. When he cultivated, the two were fully coupled, and his soul strength was effectively fed back. In this way, the imbalance between his body and soul that had plagued him since the beginning of his cultivation would become history. Luo Nan inevitably spent some time on the soul cloak, adjusting the reserves and increments of his soul strength to a degree that matched the strength of his body. Sure enough, it felt quite different. As for whether or not it was the optimal state, he would have to carefully experience it in the future, polish and adjust it. Only now did Luo Nan turn his attention to another direction. He saw that Yuan Yi was about to be unable to hold on any longer. Luo Nan split his attention to circle around Yuan Yi's body a few times. He wanted to ponder over a method to help Yuan Yi resolve its pain, but he discovered that something was wrong upon closer inspection. The pitiful mush-mouth ape before him clearly had a fatal drain in its body, aside from the enormous amount of essence energy it consumed to regenerate. That fellow, the Wraith sign, was still holding him back. Indeed, the Wraith sign had been implanted into Yuan Yi's body a long time ago. It had devoured Yuan Yi's abundant essence energy to fatten itself. It seemed to be in a certain stage of evolution. This sort of devouring would have been fine in the past. With the mush-mouth ape's powerful essence energy reserves and regenerative abilities, the Wraith sign would be able to maintain a balance no matter how greedy it was. But right now, due to the destructive power of an extraordinary, Yuan-Yi needed to divide a large portion of its reserves to regenerate its limbs. And this gave the Wraith sign a chance. The Wraith sign's insatiable greed instinctively did not care whether the state of the parasite was good or bad. On the contrary, Yuan-Yi's poor state caused its ability to control its own essence energy to decline. The Wraith sign seized the opportunity to expand the scope of its devouring and absorption, finally breaking the balance. The mush-mouthed ape was a natural hunter and a powerful warrior, but its instincts were still unable to understand the weight of its own life and death choices. It wanted to regenerate its 2 arms, but it was apprehensive of the Wraith sign's devouring and absorption, causing its own state to run madly toward an irreversible and desperate situation. It was really enough. Luo Nan wanted to control the Wraith sign's greedy instincts. After all, Yuan-Yi was an extremely rare instant combat power. If it weren't for its existence today, He Yueyin would have most likely died without a corpse remaining. Luo Nan was just about to give the Wraith sign an order when a marvelous vibration suddenly came from the area covered by the soul cloak. It made his hair stand on end. Luo Nan's mind quickly turned to an area several hundred kilometers away. A thunderclap rang out from the depths of the hazy clouds. 2 figures that were incompatible with the cloudy world he was used to appeared out of thin air. One of them was a bit familiar. She was wrapped in a layer of muslin clothing. Her figure was graceful, but it was illusory and unreal. Her hair hung down like a waterfall of green light, half concealing her figure. She was covered in a layer of cloud energy, drifting back and forth. She was simply the best spokesperson for the cold ghost. This was Snake Tongue. Luo Nan's heart fiercely thumped a few times after confirming the identity of the newcomer. He nearly charged over. Luckily, he remembered that there was another fellow by Snake Tongue's side. This person also appeared in the form of a soul body. The strength of the aura that was exposed even exceeded the range of Luo Nan's usual estimations. Luo Nan could only rely on his senses. It seemed that this person wasn't much different from President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu. An extraordinary? Luo Nan's thoughts were still unclear when the air over there vibrated. The deviation in direction is too great. It's at least 300 kilometers. There aren't more than 3 people in the inner world who are able to warp spacetime and realize the teleportation of soul bodies. Not to mention that the spatial structure of this world is completely different from that of Earth. Secretary General Gong is too modest. Snake Tongue's tone was indifferent as she spoke flattering words. She didn't know that their conversation had already been transmitted several hundred kilometers away through some inconceivable channel. How could Luo Nan not know that the other person who had appeared in the cloud world in the form of an out-of-body state was the Deputy Secretary General of the Explorers Society headquarters, Gong Qi, who had graced Xia City with grace? The 2 of them flew through the air. They were probably shaken by Yuan-Yi's roar or attracted by the aftermath of the spatial turbulence earlier. The direction in which they flew later also proved this point. Luo Nan didn't understand at all. Why was Gong Qi able to come to the cloud world? He was even more stupefied right now. What should he do next? Based on the speed at which the 2 flew, they would arrive in this area in half a minute at most. Luo Nan's consciousness could return to the real world, but what about Yuan-Yi and the Wraith sign on Yuan-Yi's body? Even if Yuan-Yi fled with all his might, he might not be able to escape the pursuit of an extraordinary like Gong Qi, let alone the fact that Yuan-Yi was currently heavily injured. Luo Nan didn't believe that this sort of strange situation could be hidden from Gong Qi's eyes. What to do? What to do? What to do? Luo Nan's mind suddenly stirred when he was at his wit's end. The Wraith sign's cheerful cry was like a hurricane that swept past. Yuan-Yi's body structure finally collapsed after a long period of pointless struggle. His enormous body suddenly collapsed, transforming into a dense mass of bloody light. The Wraith sign at the center of his body swallowed it cleanly. With the Wraith sign's own ability, it shouldn't have been able to devour it cleanly and quickly. However, there was something else within the Wraith sign that revealed its extraordinary power. The Blood Soul Temple. The Blood Flame Order viewed the Blood Soul Temple as their foundation, but a freak combination of factors formed a symbiotic relationship with the Wraith Sign. The Blood Soul Temple suddenly stole the show, working hand in glove with the Wraith Sign to display a powerful diversion ability. From Yuan Yi's perspective, nothing was more tragic than a bottomless pit turning into two. This was the final straw that broke the camel's back. In the blink of an eye, the enormous essence energy that came from Yuan Yi was divided and consumed by the Wraith Sign and the Blood Soul Temple. The power was like a whale sucking in water. In the blink of an eye, not a single drop was left. Luo Nan had just obtained his immediate combat power, but it collapsed and dissolved like this. Not even a drop of blood existed. However, Luo Nan didn't have the time to lament at this critical juncture. Instead, he felt deeply fortunate. He immediately called out to the Wraith Sign, telling this damnable thing to quickly scram. Compared to the obvious target of the mushed-mouthed ape, the human-faced arachnid that wandered on the mental plane escaped far too easily. It fled into the depths of the polar domain in the blink of an eye, leaving no traces behind. Gong Qi and Snake Tongue rushed to the scene a dozen seconds later. All they saw was the scattered wisps of cloud energy and the remnants of the mushed-mouthed ape's essence energy that flooded the cloud world. Aside from this, there were no other traces that could be traced. In the real world, on the bed of a suite in the Shangbing building, Luo Nan opened his eyes and stared straight at the ceiling. The joy of escaping with his life had already been erased. All that was left was the deep silence and restlessness of the bottom of a trench. Was he lucky? Lucky my ass. Gong Qi and Snake Tongue. His cloud world, the mystical place that his mother had used inconceivable methods to guide him to, had actually been invaded by these two. They had wantonly searched, polluting the purity of that place. They might even have destroyed the clues his mother had left behind. He could not allow it. He absolutely could not allow it. Under the effect of Luo Nan's emotions, the sealed system's large production line trembled. Cat Eyes, who had a closer relationship with him, sensed the abnormality and took the initiative to contact him. What's wrong? Luo Nan didn't respond. He didn't know how to respond. He just continued to struggle with himself. Even if he loathed and hated, reality was right there. Disregarding Snake Tongue, Gong Qi, who had somehow entered the cloud world, was a genuine extraordinary. His strength was robust beyond compare. With Luo Nan's ability, how should he deal with him? How should he expel or even exterminate him? Reason and emotions clashed. Restlessness and depression twisted together. It consumed nearly all of Luo Nan's mental strength. He could only search the system over and over again for the power that could be used. He made deductions in hopes of finding a way to deal with it. Luo Nan had experienced this sort of situation before when he had to deal with the dimensional crossbow. But he had to pay attention to this. Even if the formidable strength of an extraordinary lay before him, defending against it and exterminating it were two completely different concepts. His deductions reached a dead end time and time again. Then he had to start all over again. The sealed system was clearly a bit overheated, so much so that every member within felt a heavy pressure. Moreover, it accumulated layer upon layer, showing no signs of abating. When this pressure accumulated to a certain degree, the star river scene embedded between reality and illusion underwent subtle yet general distortions and deformations. Cat Eyes could not help but transmit once more, "What the hell are you doing?" Luo Nan was disturbed. He had just furrowed his brows when a peculiar reaction cut in from the side of the system. Before he could truly realize what was going on, he sensed a hustle and bustle in the passageway outside the door. It was quite noisy. At this time, reason slightly suppressed his emotions. He understood that the endless loop was not that easy to undo. He put on his clothes and got up after some thought. He opened the door and went out. He just so happened to bump into a staff member passing by the door. "What's going on?" "Oh, Boss Luo." The staff member recognized Luo Nan. He greeted him and said, "That young lady over there. She's the one you saved from the hands of Quantum Corporation." She went from a moderate coma to a light coma. In theory, she can wake up at any time. Luo Nan loosened his hand and responded with a bit of a daze. Really? Luo Nan's domain spanned an enormous amount, causing him to be unable to react for a time. But Luo Nan followed the staff member forward under the drive of some marvelous sensation. They arrived at the corridor outside the 12th floor's monitoring room. He looked at the girl on the bed through the enormous glass wall. The girl lay there quietly. Her breathing was steady. All sorts of equipment were disregarded. It was as if she was sleeping soundly every day. Chapter 490. For now, we don't know why we are special. For the time being, we will regard the unknown as our final destination. Thank the laws for allowing our souls to appear. We will be fettered in the end. Perhaps one day the answer will be clear, and we are already on our way. The oppressive sound of the steam whistle pierced through the waves and the dust floating in the air. Before the first sound died away, another sound rang out. 3 consecutive sounds rang out. When the whistle died away, the ship made a large circle on the sea and headed back to shore. Luo Nan stood at the stern of the ship. He held on to the railing of the ship and looked calmly at the sea behind him. The ashes of the 2 ability users scattered in the wind amidst the great waves created by the opening of the propeller. They floated down, some rising and falling with the waves, and some being swallowed by the fish and shrimp behind them. Luo Nan's powerful mental senses stretched the length of his memories and filled them with far too many details that would make one's mood depressed. Luo Nan took a deep breath. His pure black suit was wrapped tightly around his body, making it a bit difficult for him to breathe. Did you know? Ability users can't be buried. Even if they are cremated, their ashes must be thrown into the sea. This is because none of us know whether or not we will be dug up by some madman in the next moment and sent to a laboratory. Zhang Yingying stood to the side, her elbows supporting the railing. She followed Luo Nan's example and looked at the sea surface that had been crushed by the propeller. Her posture was a bit lower, and the topic she was talking about was very heavy. Yet her voice was bright and light as always. Live well, lad. Luo Nan didn't turn his head. He didn't respond because he didn't know what expression to use at this time. Today's ceremony was a send-off for the 2 ability users who had been killed in the Municipal Plaza incident a few days ago. One was Charlie, who had been killed by Luo Yuan's parasite in the Shanging building. The other was the driver who had driven Luo Nan to the Kuwang Communications building. In a strict sense, the deaths of these 2 people were inextricably linked to Luo Nan. Though no one mentioned this to him, he became aware of it when he put on his suit and stepped onto the ship. Awareness was one thing. His mood was another. Zhang Yingying came over to talk about this topic, and his heart resisted it. Luckily, the topic soon changed. Zhang Yingying talked about more practical things. The outsourcing business is complete. Trigate Security has already transferred the money. There are some financial and tax issues involved. The firm is still calculating it. But don't worry, I won't let you down. The amount is also quite considerable. Oh. Luo Nan responded without thinking. Such a topic was unable to attract his attention. Zhang Yingying could roughly guess his mood. She pursed her lips and didn't say anything else. She continued to lean against the railing and watched the sea with him. Time passed bit by bit. During this period, there were people coming and going, and some gazes were cast over from afar. Luo Nan knew, but he didn't want to worry about it. He didn't want to pay attention to it. The ship docked at the shore, and the guests who attended the funeral walked down the gangway one by one and shook hands with the relatives of the 2 victims. Luo Nan walked forward step by step within the stream of people, but his footsteps gradually faltered. Soon, he fell behind by quite a bit. Zhang Yingying at the side clicked her tongue. She immediately grabbed his arm and led him forward with large strides. Luo Nan was brought to the side of the gangway before he could come back to his senses. Luo Nan's family members didn't react at all. They just shook hands with them in a stupefied manner. They brought along a child who wasn't much younger than Luo Nan to bow and express their thanks. Charlie had 2 children, and the driver, Tian Lai, also had one. Compared to the adults, these children's blank and stupefied states were truly unbearable for Luo Nan. His blood was about to congeal at this moment. He didn't come back to his senses all the way until he got off the ship. Zhang Yingying at the side acted like a good brother. She draped her arm over his shoulder in a familiar manner, pulling him along the dock. At the same time, she whispered into his ear, "Don't always play the bitter type. Don't get yourself into a dead end. Everyone is doing this for work. It's just that the scope and nature of an ability user's business are more special. You can't be thinking that I'm comforting you, right? I just feel that there are far too many things related to human lives. Aren't you jealous? But that's right. Humans are damned social creatures. The death of a person is like digging a hole in the web of social relationships. The closer you get, the more awkward it gets. But if you can't get close to it, then don't force yourself to get close. Can't get close to it? Really can't get close to it. Just like Charlie. The other party clearly went for President Ouyang. Oh, old Tian suffered a bit. Zhang Yingying was a practical person. She thought for a bit and said, "If you really feel bad, then put some money into the friendship fund. Do a targeted donation or something. It's much better than being sad and sorrowful here." Friendship fund? Luo Nan searched for related content on the Psychic Wave network. He discovered that this was a public welfare fund initiated by headquarters. Its main direction was to provide financial aid to society members or their family members who encountered special circumstances, ensuring their stable lives. Luo Nan's mind sensed something as he was looking up the information. He raised his head and saw Cat Eyes standing in front of him, talking to Chinikuan. They were waiting for him to come over. Zhang Yingying saw them as well, but she still maintained the attitude of a good brother. She walked over with Luo Nan in a carefree manner. Today, Cat Eyes wore a rare formal attire. She wore light makeup, appearing dignified and serious. It was just that her hanging left arm was rather eye-catching. She had been caught in the blast when the planar crossbow was unleashed. Her upper left arm was nearly blown off. Though she had received proper treatment, the shattered bones and flesh needed a period of time to grow back. Luo Nan and Cat Eyes had already greeted each other on the ship. The two had matters to discuss, so they agreed to travel together. Mr. Luo. Chinikuan was also dressed in pitch-black formal attire. He indicated to Luo Nan that the car was parked by the dock. Chinikuan was still responsible for Luo Nan's security work. However, as the situation escalated, the composition of the security team changed. He was no longer the captain. Instead, he existed as Luo Nan's personal bodyguard. God also made similar changes. Today was Saturday, November 26th. It had been exactly 7 days since the incident at the municipal plaza. Luo Nan did not attend class today, but he had matters to attend to at school. This was part of the planned itinerary, so the car was already prepared. Zhang Yingying giggled, "You don't mind if I hitch a ride, right? Take me to the cliffside section of the Huanhai Highway. It's very fast. It's only 2 steps away." Cat Eyes turned her gaze to look at the two with their arms around each other's shoulders. Her gaze then fell on Zhang Yingying's face. "You're going to the bottom of the sea to train in seclusion again? You're getting more and more desperate. Sister Cat Eyes." Zhang Yingying released her arm from Luo Nan's neck. She walked forward and hugged Cat Eyes lightly. She giggled, "I'm the one who cherishes my life. I can tell from your appearance that you're going straight to the gates of hell, not cultivating for 3 days. I think it's more like someone is by my side, but I'm going to the gates of hell. If you cherish your life, shouldn't you stay far away from someone?" The two were friends who played the wilderness game together. Their friendship was quite good, and they often contacted each other. They spoke very casually. A certain someone, who was unjustly implicated, felt even more stifled. He immediately got into the car. Gouda was in the driver's seat. Under normal circumstances, Chinikuan and Luo Nan should be sitting together in the back. It would be convenient for them to deal with dangerous situations. But Zhang Yingying sat next to Luo Nan when the car door opened. She even stretched comfortably. The bulletproof SUV really did have this amount of space. Chinikuan could only get into the car from the other side, squeezing Luo Nan in the center. Cat Eyes was already annoyed with a certain someone. She happily sat in the front passenger seat. It was spacious and clean. The car started, and Zhang Yingying moved closer to Luo Nan and whispered into his ear, "You've been quite familiar with Cat Eyes lately. You want to take advantage of her?" "Oh, I'm asking for advice." Luo Nan was very familiar with lying. Zhang Yingying sneered, "What advice? All-encompassing perception?" She stuck out her tongue after speaking, apologizing to Cat Eyes. Cat Eyes didn't care at all. "I don't have all-encompassing perception, but long-range perception is quite decent. You know, I just learned the dripping sword. If I can use it to achieve long-range killing, then it will be more suitable for my path." "What do you mean I know?" "I don't know." Zhang Yingying curled her lips. "After pulling business for you, I practiced holding my breath at the bottom of the sea. In the end, as soon as I emerged, I heard that a certain someone provoked an extraordinary. He nearly blew up hundreds of thousands of people in the municipal plaza into the sky." Cat Eyes raised her injured arm from the front passenger seat. "Personal experience. Priceless advice." She was referring to the earlier part about the gates of hell. Luo Nan's face twitched, and he didn't utter a word. On the other side, Chinikuan couldn't help but speak up. "This matter doesn't have much to do with Mr. Luo. In the end, the enemy is just using Mr. Luo to draw attention. Their target is still President Ouyang. But even the president has times when he can't take care of everyone. When immortals fight, mortals suffer." Zhang Yingying's conclusion hit the nail on the head. "Frankly speaking, if you think they died because of you, then that means you believe yourself to be an extraordinary immortal. The world revolves around you. Arrogance is the real problem. Get lost." Luo Nan finally couldn't hold back from retorting. Zhang Yingying laughed heartily. She was the same as a certain someone in the front passenger seat. They both had sharp tongues and were used to tearing at people's faces. However, she was an elderly person who was truly an optimist. She hoped that the people beside her would be happy with her. Zhang Yingying knocked on the car window amidst her laughter. "Thanks for giving me a ride. Just stop here. Right now, my place is truly a humble-dwelling water cage. I won't be inviting you to be my guest." The car stopped, and Zhang Yingying bluntly used the back of her hand to pat Luo Nan's cheek. She was full of teasing. "Boss Luo. Wait until you truly become an immortal before you think about those boring things." She jumped out of the car laughing and giggling the moment she succeeded. She leaped over the railing and fell towards the sea below the cliff that was dozens of meters high. The waves shook violently, producing a muffled sound. Speaking of which, the white rainbow aura on her body had truly grown fiercer and fiercer. It had practically affected the appearance of her normal life aura. Presumably, she needed to seriously polish her control over it. The car started up once more. Luo Nan's thoughts turned and returned to himself. He didn't want to be coy and pretentious. He didn't want to be a sour and rotten idiot who said, "It's all my fault." He also didn't feel that he was truly above the majority of people. Oh, perhaps there was already a bit of an omen. But let's not talk about anything else. Right now, there was a fatal obstacle waiting for him in front of him. It was an obstacle that he could not cross. How could he have the qualifications to do so? Luo Nan's mind gradually became clear. Perhaps today's gloomy mood was more due to the root of the illness from the pressure of the past few days. He could forget about having a good day as long as the pressure wasn't removed. Chapter 491. Though Zhang Yingying's words had no head or tail, she still remembered to leave a link for Luo Nan. Luo Nan was still muddle-headed. He instinctively clicked on the link and jumped to the page. After the network space refreshed, he was greeted with a title. A morning of practice in exchange for rain. What was this inexplicable? Huh? These words and the accompanying picture looked familiar. The picture Luo Nan saw was of a quilt drying in the sun. The color was quite plain, and there were no patterns on it. Therefore, he could clearly see a circle of water marks on the quilt, forming a human shape. At first glance, the title and the picture had no head or tail, but when Luo Nan came to his senses, he immediately understood the situation involved. How could he not understand? Wasn't this title and this picture the elementary results he had posted to headquarters' website at the beginning of the month? He remembered that he had practiced with the condensation ring for half an afternoon, accumulating a large amount of water droplets. He exploded and wet his bedding. He thought it was interesting, so he posted a picture online to reply to Her Majesty Empress Wu's post about the dripping sword. It could be considered a record of his own cultivation, and it could be considered as encouragement to those on the same path. Luo Nan had jumped to headquarters' website at this time, and his account was automatically connected. The information that had been accumulating for many days surged up, and a continuous notification sound rang out. Luo Nan looked at the number prompt and saw that it was already 99 plus. He clicked to clear it, and it quickly grew. Soon, it was almost full. What was going on? From Luo Nan's impression, the title of this reply was quite ordinary. It was inconspicuous among the tens of thousands of replies. It had always been cold and cheerless. Many days had passed since then. Luo Nan had pretty much forgotten about it, but it suddenly became a hot topic. There was something good. This reply was pushed to the top of the post, and the lighting effects were extremely prominent. Though Luo Nan wasn't in a good mood, he couldn't help but feel a bit of vanity and joy when he saw his post explode. However, this rare good mood was choked back when he saw the first quoted reply. This reply was full of gunpowder. Judging by the looks of it, people who use a watering can when their D**ck is small are shameful. It looked like the source of the watering can man was here. There was also the summer spray. Judging by the momentum, it probably wasn't a good word. The person who replied was not anonymous. His ID was REE, and he was verified to be an explorer directly under the headquarters. Below, someone quoted the reply, "The human shape on the blanket is very obvious, and it can also be seen that it is a very light mist. These small details are very convincing." Looking at the reply time, it had been 4 days ago on Tuesday. REE had been online the whole time. She quickly replied, "Xia Chui's vanity can't be cured. A spray bottle is enough." It was this kind of straightforward sarcasm and attack that attracted more attention. From there, his popularity increased rapidly, and the frequency of replies increased as well. Someone spoke objectively with facts. "I've just awakened, and the association's certification is sea level. Tell me the number. I gave it a try just now. The complete water drop sword is too strenuous. The condensation ring alone is fine, but maintaining it is too difficult." The maximum number of condensation rings was 7, which was the level of bedwetting, and it was still at the level of a baby. Right now, the world is spinning, and the above is what I said with my eyes closed. Same, close your eyes and dictate. The limit is 12. Infants have passed, but not yet. Several consecutive experimental data didn't support Luo Nan. Moreover, there was even a data emperor who came out to ridicule him. He unleashed a barrage of attacks. Based on the maximum diameter of the water droplets gathered by the condensation ring, one water droplet contains approximately 0.5 milliliters of water. 12 water droplets, 6 milliliters of water. Even at the baby level, this is a symptom of oliguria. Luo Nan wasn't angry at this time. He just couldn't help but want to laugh. Just how free were these people? And REE jumped out at this time. This time, he brought a complete video. He appeared on camera in person. "I personally tested it. 91 in half an hour. If I keep this up, I'll be in trouble. This is a preschool level, right? Everyone knows my level, so I won't say much. Welcome to the new Xia City B+ rank powerhouse who has been registered for a month. Show us the ultimate skill of the spray bottle. Ree looked like he was in his 30s. He had a square face and thick eyebrows. He had thin eyes and thin lips. He looked very sharp. Luo Nan looked at Ree's registration information. This guy was the more active and open type on the internet. He didn't mind information being leaked at all. He had all sorts of information. From the information, he could be considered a veteran. He had been registered for 12 years. His combat strength had reached the B rank. He belonged to the architect level. He could be considered a core power in the society. Not to mention anything else, he was able to simultaneously control 91 condensation rings and maintain their consumption. This was something that ordinary ability users couldn't do. He was worthy of the architect level. Replies and likes flowed in an endless stream below the video for a time. More and more people followed suit. It was impossible for this type of post to not be popular once it became a trend. The densely packed replies were mostly a stage for self-demonstration. Some of them increased the number of water droplets and announced their abilities. There were also some who showed off 1 or 2 droplets. Among them was an ID called Gao Tianmeng. He gave Luo Nan an extremely deep impression. He also uploaded a video. The real person didn't appear, but the room was densely packed with water droplets. There were at least 200 to 300 of them. Every droplet was perfectly round and full. They exploded at the same time, instantly filling the air with water mist. At the same time, he added a grim emoji. Some people are completely ignorant of the power of the mental side. This person was even more amazing. He clearly stood on Luo Nan's side. Many people gasped in admiration at the moment, but there were also people who used their status to say, "Senior people doing this. Are you trying to set a counterexample?" It didn't take long for Re to reply. Her tone was full of sarcasm. "Don't you have any shame helping your underlings blow water? You, Gao Tianshi, can stand and pee, but that doesn't mean that everyone in Xia City is a man. Hee, I still need to congratulate you guys for producing a newly registered B rank power, the watering pot man. Oh, he's not just a newly registered anymore. It's been almost 2 months. He's already a senior Xia watering pot man, Gao Tianshi, Gao Tianshi." Luo Nan guessed that the person who stood up for him should be the B rank power of Xia City, the Heavenly Master Gao Meng. He was also the deputy chief commander of the branch during the Municipal Plaza incident. It was just that Gao Meng's reply was a bit lonely in the middle of a large number of posts. This caused a group of people led by Ree to attack him. From this point on, the direction of the posts changed subtly. Some people used the Society's ability user level settings to classify the videos displayed over the past few days. From the Awakened to the Architect, from the C to the B+, they were roughly divided into 6 levels. Each level had a standard number of condensation rings. Then they pulled people from all over to appraise them. It was as if the level of one's ability wasn't qualified if they didn't verify it. Later on, Luo Nan's first reply was a bit like he had been hung up and beaten. Some busybodies estimated the number of condensation rings Luo Nan needed to wet his quilt. They set the number at 300, half-truthfully. From then on, they listed it as a standard unit, calling it a watering pot. Then there were things like C-rank psychic ability, which was equal to 1/15 of a watering pot. B-rank psychic ability, which was equal to 0.7 watering pot. Later on, they probably felt that the unit of watering pot was too complicated. Through Ree's suggestion, they simplified it to blow. It was a step down from Xia watering pot. What was Xia watering pot? Luo Nan didn't quite understand the explanation. He could only give Zhang Yingying the same dumbstruck expression, so the internet of the inner world is also like this. I just sent a picture. Zhang Yingying replied in an instant, "It really is you. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Send a video back. What are you talking about? If this was 2 or 3 weeks ago, he really might have refuted a few times. But today, he was already paying more attention to the level of the soul cloak when it came to the technique of the dripping sword. He was paying more attention to the interference scene, the deep sea world, and the like. He had long since lost the thought of simply stacking the numbers. What else was there to say to this group of people? If you don't want to go, then I'll go. These grandsons are too infuriating. Cat Eyes is here right now. I'll have her take a video and upload it. Oh right, how's the level of your dripping sword? Don't overreach yourself. How about this? I'll immediately contact Her Majesty and have her give you special treatment. Should I refuse? Cat Eyes turned her head from the front passenger seat at this time. So it's you, watering pot guy. You have a head but no tail. You really do give our Xia City a lot of face. Huh? Mr. Luo is watering pot guy? Qi Nikuan was shocked to the side. Even God, who was driving the car, was paying attention. Only now did Luo Nan discover that the influence of this absurd hot topic on the internet was quite extraordinary. Is this important? People have come knocking on our door. You tell me if it's important or not. Let's put it this way. I'm a C-rank psychic ability user. Then you say that my ability is 0. 1. Is it okay if I beat you up? Xia City's blowing pot guy is referring to Xia City's blowing pot guy. Don't you see that the people who are using this unit are all well-known figures of Xia City? Aside from President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu, who don't dare provoke them, everyone else has a price tag. There were tens of thousands of replies. Luo Nan couldn't flip through them all in a short amount of time. He only noticed that there really was such a reply after Cat Eye's reminder. It listed Old Man Yu, Mr. Bai, Gao Meng, Horn Demon, and other B-rank powerhouses of Xia City. There were also some C-rank backbone powers. All of them were arranged into a list, using the blowing pot guy standard one by one. Even fleshly bodies like Giant Arm and Crag Burst were inexplicably converted. They were grandly displayed on the list. For a time, his eyes were filled with words like 1 blowing pot guy, 2 blowing pots, 0 blowing pots, and so on. Afterwards, RE's expression became even more arrogant. I welcome watering pot guy to come and clear his name. At the very least, you should post a video like Teacher Gao. We can adjust the standard according to reality. If you really can do it, then I'll kneel. Of course, if Her Majesty Empress Wu personally comes, then I'll kneel and lick her. Otherwise, please come out and slap yourself in the face. Xia City has been bragging for all these years. My bladder is about to explode. It's nothing if I explode a little. Chapter 492. What do you think, boss? How does it feel to be the fuse? I feel like this nickname is much better than the watering can man. Luo Nan found it inconceivable. It's such an obvious attack. Super doesn't care? Cat Eyes sneered. Isn't regional killing normal in this era of isolated cities? Headquarters has few people to do things, but there are many things to do. It's only logical that they can't manage it all. I understand. Luo Nan still remembered what Bamboo Pole had said during the supplementary lessons. Xia City had a clear atmosphere due to Ouyang Chen's existence over the past few years. There was also the establishment of the Psychic Wave Network, and there were special resources in the outer wilderness area. Xia City was at the apex of the various branches. The number of registered and resident awakened and above characters had always exceeded 1,000 for many years, exceeding the average by nearly 50%. And the rise of Her Majesty Empress Wu catalyzed this advantage, causing Xia City's status to become more and more special. Faced with this situation, other cities, especially headquarters, had a popular saying: the Xia City branch had independent tendencies. They could separate from headquarters at any time, start their own furnace, and seize resources. Even if there's a regional conflict, why does it seem like REE has a grudge against me for killing his father? Things like public opinion have always listened to whoever has the loudest voice. Plus, some people have a strange imagination. They can nitpick and find a good entry point. Naturally, they can seize the opportunity to cause trouble. As for Re's unforgiving attitude, it's understandable. He's the disciple of Old Man Gong. Who? Gong Chi is the proud disciple of Deputy Secretary General Gong. He himself comes from a family of cultivators. It's said that before the age of distortion, his family was a famous family of spirit cultivators. They were proficient in black witchcraft. Right now, his father holds a position in several research funds of the society. He has a deep friendship with Gong Chi. Chi Nikuen had heard of this person before. Ree is the candidate for the head of the Lam O family. 10 years ago, she killed a target with a curse from 1,000 miles away. She became famous in one fell swoop. She and Snake Tongue are known as the Dark Witch Duo. Luo Nan raised his eyebrows as he listened to the information, but he didn't say anything. He just leaned back and looked at the roof of the off-road vehicle, deep in thought. Cat Eyes twisted her body and stared at him with interest to see his reaction. Do you think that the water inside is very deep? Speaking of which, last time Gong Chi was in Xia City, he was given the cold shoulder. I heard that he went into seclusion after he returned and hasn't appeared in public since. The corner of Luo Nan's eye jumped. The information Cat Eyes spoke of was actually the information he had requested her to gather a few days ago. Today was the day to sort out and summarize the information. Who would have thought that this person would take the opportunity to say it out loud? Chi Nikuen followed and said, Mr. Luo, Cat Eyes is right. Re's attack came out of the blue. Their choice of target and timing are all questionable. There's also the dripping sword. The people in the car had personally experienced the battle a week ago. They had more or less experienced Luo Nan's attainments in the dripping sword. No matter how good Luo Nan was, he definitely wouldn't be as bad as Re said. Someone's setting the tempo, right? That's right. That's why Mr. Gao appeared in the middle to correct the direction, but those people circled back. Cat Eyes and Chi Nikuen continued their discussion. They both felt that Luo Nan shouldn't reveal himself so easily. But at the same time, Zhang Yingying incited him again and again. Perhaps Her Majesty Empress Wu didn't agree to her preposterous request, so she simply played a roundabout way to save the country. She sent over all of Her Majesty Empress Wu's teaching materials and lecture materials related to the dripping sword over the past 2 years. There were even some internal training videos from the firm. It was far more comprehensive than what Papercut had provided. Luo Nan didn't have a clear response to this. Whether it was Cat Eyes and Chi Nikuen's cautiousness style or Zhang Yingying's direct supply style, they only circled his mind. They didn't have any effect. Luo Nan had his own thoughts and goals. Everything else had to serve his goals. No matter what sort of goal Ree held, no matter what methods she used, Luo Nan wouldn't dance to her rhythm. Unless it would help Luo Nan accomplish his goals. At this point, Luo Nan closed his eyes. He sank the influence of the information on the ship and the car one by one, allowing his mind to return to tranquility. Only in this way could he have enough concentration to ponder over relevant problems. The off-road car entered the magnetic rail highway and sped all the way to Acumen College. Since it was the weekend, their group of people parked their car in a nearby parking lot. They walked into the campus and arrived at the Gear building on the North Shore. Cat Eyes, come with me. Brother Chin, Brother Gao, you guys do as you please. Arriving at Gear was tantamount to arriving at their own home. Luo Nan didn't stand on ceremony. He led Cat Eyes upstairs to the viewing room on the 4th floor. They just so happened to converge with the sunlight shining in. Luo Nan squinted his eyes as he sat on the floor illuminated by the sunlight. The warm light was very comfortable, but his thoughts flowed back and forth in his mind, never stopping for a moment. Cat Eyes sat by his side. She picked up an antique hand-cranked bean grinder and poured in coffee beans. She casually ground them and played with them. Her mouth was unforgiving. You're really quite gloomy right now. Am I? Your thoughts are crafty and your schemes are hard to fathom. If you're not gloomy, then what is? Boss, are you preparing to become an evil god? Don't say such unreliable words. Okay, say something reliable. Why do you have ideas about Gongqi? Is it that obvious? If it's a bit more obvious, Qinikuan and Gouda can probably just report it. You can't really believe that the person who released the dimensional crossbow is related to Gongqi, right? If you think this way, what kind of brain circuitry do you have? If that old man really had this kind of ability, he would have been the president of headquarters a long time ago. He wouldn't have been holed up in the position of Deputy Secretary General for so many years. You've already told me your reasons. What are you worried about? I'm not worried. I'm just unhappy that I'm doing stupid things with a certain someone. Hey, are you really going to sleep? Luo Nan didn't pay any more attention to Cat Eyes. Cat Eyes' role here was very simple, aside from intelligence gathering. She was there to help him cover up and let him do things calmly. Otherwise, with Qinikuan and Gouda right in front of him, it would be quite awkward if they saw anything. The side effect of doing this was that a few bad rumors would spread. Qinikuan and Gouda's mouths were tight, but Luo Nan and Cat Eyes had been traveling together in the same car and staying in the same room during this period of time. They were overly close, and it was truly eye-catching. Why would the two bodyguards need to spread the news? Cat Eyes had asked earlier, but Luo Nan would often close his eyes and pretend to be asleep. What in the world was he up to? She was too lazy to ask later. She didn't care about her reputation. It was useless even if she cared. While Luo Nan's mind was wandering, she was grinding coffee, reading books, and so on. She looked extremely idle and bored, but she was actually using these small actions to adapt to the new changes in her body. The feedback power of Luo Nan's sealed system grew stronger and stronger during this period of time, causing her soul strength to grow by an even greater margin. The range of her all-encompassing senses easily broke through 100 meters. The effects of her long-range perception were even more profound. She needed to carefully recuperate. How Cat Eyes would deal with the rumors and slanders and recuperate her mental state was not a topic Luo Nan was concerned with. His consciousness entered the cloud world a mere second after he closed his eyes. Luo Nan's control over the cloud world was growing stronger and stronger. He just needed to shift his mind to the Wraith sign and he could use it as a springboard. He could see the vast area covered by the soul cloak in his eyes. This sort of simple observation was simple and safe. It could be done at any time and any place. But today, he specifically called Cat Eyes over to act as a cover. There was an extremely important node that required special attention. When Luo Nan's consciousness shifted over, there just so happened to be a mushed-mouth ape. Its body collapsed amidst a mournful shriek. It converged into a mass of bloody light and was completely devoured by the Wraith sign. At first glance, this scene was simply a replay of the pitiful Yuan Yi from a week ago. But on a deeper level, the Wraith sign was already disdainful of the mushed-mouth ape's abundant essence energy. What truly needed this essence energy was the blood soul temple that was established within the Wraith sign's body. At this very moment, lava flowed atop the rocky mountain of the Blood Soul Temple. At first glance, the lava flowed along the mountain's terrain, meandering and diverging. But upon closer inspection, one would discover that the flow of lava did not flow according to the mountain's terrain at all. Instead, it was driven by some sort of power. The lava flowed against the will of the heart as it shuttled up and down. Looking at it for a long time, it was simply like the flow of the blood and energy of the human body. It endowed this ugly and majestic mountain with a bewitching vitality. However, today's focus was still on the very peak of the mountain. There was the final structure atop the mountain. It was an enormous altar that covered the entire peak. It was piled up and built within the bloody light. This represented the completion of the 2000 step of the Blood Soul Temple, the 5th stage of the Blood Soul Temple. This was not a simple matter. The remaining several hundred steps of the Blood Soul Temple were completely formed from the essence energy of the mushed-mouth apes that ran amok in the cloud world. Counting the numbers, Luo Nan was able to observe that the Wraith sign had hunted at least 4 mush-mouth apes of various sizes this week. It must be known that these valiant demons possessed combat strength equivalent to a B-rank powerhouse. Even if they were lacking in intelligence, their bodies were enormous. They were proficient in flight, and their speed was astonishing. They could attack the mental and material planes at the same time. All of these things were enough to make up for their lack of intelligence. Therefore, killing 4 mush-mouth apes was equivalent to killing 4 B-rank powerhouses. If it wasn't for the Wraith sign's natural ability to restrain the mush-mouth apes, and if it wasn't for the fact that the Wraith sign had evolved after devouring Yuan Yi's essence energy, greatly increasing its hunting and devouring abilities. If it wasn't for Luo Nan's soul cloak that covered a vast area of several thousand kilometers, allowing him to completely control information and intelligence, accomplishing this in a short week would simply be a fantasy story. Even though it was completed now, Luo Nan still felt that it was somewhat unrealistic. But no matter what, the completion of the Blood Soul Temple was already an established fact. Luo Nan looked at the 6-layered altar atop the mountain peak. The bloody light flowed upon the altar, stretching out a rigorous structure, and engraving abstract designs. This was an eye-opener for Luo Nan, but he was also very baffled. Where in the world did this technique come from? You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.